Here we go. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Westford, I would like to welcome you to this evening's Candidates Night. My name is Laura Dickey, and I currently serve as the League's spokesperson. We are proud to sponsor this event each year. This is our 51st annual Candidates Night, but our first virtual one. I'd like to thank both the candidates who are here tonight and all other candidates running. We appreciate the time and dedication it takes to run for office and serve the town. We'd also like to thank all town employees and essential workers during this challenging time. In addition to appearing here tonight, candidates also had a chance to address voters by answering the questions found in this year's Voter's Guide. The Voter's Guide is on our website at lwv.westford.org. We encourage you to read those responses, which include answers from candidates not attending Candidates Night. Just a few words about the League. The League of Women Voters encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League is a nonpartisan political organization of women and men and does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. We always welcome new members, and you can join on our website, lwv.westford.org. Questions for the candidates tonight were generated by voter submissions and the League. Questions have been edited and combined for clarity. I would now like to introduce our moderator for the evening. Heather McNeil is a member of the Andover-North Andover League of Women Voters. We are delighted to have her back again this year to direct the discussion. Heather?
Thank you very much, Laura. So good evening. As Laura said, I'm your moderator, Heather McNeil from the Andover-North Andover League. Welcome to tonight's virtual candidates forum. If at any point you cannot hear me or if you're having any technical difficulties, just give me a little wave. Election day for the candidates running this year will be on Tuesday, June 30th, and voters are encouraged to vote by mail. The event tonight is a virtual forum, not a debate, as candidates will be answering questions that were submitted by League members and community members prior to the event. There will be 5 panels of candidates filmed over 2 sessions. Our first 3 panels will feature the candidates running for library trustees, planning board, and moderator. There are also 2 candidates for 2 3-year terms on the Board of Health, whom you will see on your ballot, Zach Cataldo and Michelle Petaniak Crawford, I hope I said her name correctly, who are running but who will not be featured during this forum. In terms of statements and answers, candidates, you will each have 2 minutes to present your opening statements and 2 minutes for closing statements, except for our library trustees who are running unopposed. You do not have to do closing statements. You will have 1 minute to answer each question. I would also ask all participants to mute themselves when they're not speaking, and please silence any cell phones or other devices that could interrupt your comments. There will be no rebuttals following answers to questions, and please keep an eye on the timekeeper on your screen, Joanna Myers, as she will show you how much time you have left and when to stop. And when you see the end sign, please finish your response. If you continue speaking well after that, I will say thank you and move on to the next candidate, as our goal is to cover as many topics as possible. So here is our first panel. During our first panel, we will hear from the 2 candidates running unopposed for 2 3-year seats as library trustees, Lynn Claremont and incumbent Robert D. Price. Candidates, please address the camera and check in with the timekeeper so we can cover a variety of topics. And just please give me a quick thumbs up. Can everyone see the timekeeper? We're good? Yeah, Mr. Price, okay. And just a reminder, if you can hear fine, then you don't have to mute yourself when someone else is talking, but if there's any feedback that starts, if you could just mute yourself if it's not your turn, that would be great. So we're going to begin with Ms. Claremont giving her opening statements, and then we'll rotate the order for the questions. So Ms. Claremont, you have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Lynn Claremont. I'm running for an open position on the Board of Library Trustees. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. I've been a resident of Westford for 33 years, and I've always been an active user and supporter of the library. I'm also a professional librarian with a master's in library science. I retired 2 years ago from a position as the assistant director at the Boylston Public Library in Boylston, Mass. So I hope to bring both my love of libraries and my experience as a librarian to the board. I have volunteered with the library in the past on various projects. I have very high regard for the staff there, and it would be my honor to support them during these unusual and difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Price.
Am I on?
You're on.
When my wife and I moved to Westford 30-odd years ago, one of our first duties was to visit Town Hall and register to vote. We then walked across Main Street and applied for our library cards. And before we knew it, we were co-chairs of the book sale committee and serving on the executive board of the Friends of the J.V. Fletcher Library. But after 11 years of hauling boxes of books, we retired and I ran for library trustee. I have served on the Board of Library Trustees for the past 21 years now, including 3 years as chair. During those years, I took advantage of the various seminars offered by the Massachusetts Library Trustees Association and the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners to become a better educated trustee. More recently, I served on the Library Facility Needs Committee that developed an application for the Massachusetts Public Library Construction Program grant. 6 years ago, I was appointed to the Community Preservation Committee as the library representative. I've also served on the Representative Town Government Study Committee and the Public Works Initiative Committee. I have served as well on the steering committee of the League of Women Voters of Westford, and in that capacity, I hosted over the years the League's town meeting preview programs on WestfordCAT. My highest priority as trustee will be to ensure that the library facility expansion program is successful, meeting all the goals of the project, including more working space for the staff, more meeting space for the patrons, and more parking space for everyone's car.
Thank you very much, Mr. Price. So our first question, Mr. Price, you'll answer first. And our first questions all have to do with the library, expansion project that you mentioned. So as the library continues to move up the wait list for state library expansion grant money, what ideas do you support for raising any additional needed funds? So Mr. Price, you have 1 minute.
Well, already the grant money is divided into 3 pieces. One is the grant itself. Another is the money supplied by the town through a debt exclusion vote, and also a portion raised by private fundraising through the Friends of the Library Foundation. So any flexibility would be in the categories of what we get on debt exclusion and what we can raise privately.
Okay, Ms. Claremont?
Same question?
Same question, yep. So any ideas for raising additional needed funds for the expansion?
I think Bob said it succinctly. There are 3 parts of it. The part you get from the state, the part that you get from the taxpayers, and the part you raise privately. And where you have some leeway and where you can come up with some ideas is with the part you raise privately. And that we will have to tackle once we know what the money situation is with the state and the town.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next question will go to both of you with Ms. Claremont, you starting first. What can the trustees do to enhance the effectiveness of the current library facilitator while waiting for this expansion project?
So this is an unusual time for the library because the building is closed. So we're very lucky. We have an amazing director and staff at the library, and they are always diligently working to provide the best services under the circumstances. So During the pandemic, they've expanded their virtual programming and electronic collections. They've just started doing drive-up delivery pickup. So, and the next big challenge would be figuring out how to open the building safely once they're allowed to by the state. So to do that opening, they're moving furniture around and setting up signage. So that's the focus right now.
Thank you, Mr. Price.
Well, Lynn has done her homework. She's absolutely right in what she's proposed. And certainly whatever plans the library would like to implement, they're going to be subject to the whim of the governor, the selectman, and the town manager. And yes, the library service has resumed. I myself dropped off some material yesterday and will pick up some new material tomorrow. It's curbside pickup. I would recommend that if anyone wants to use a library service, that he check the library website to see what's described in the crawl banner on the homepage.
Okay, and you've both covered a little bit of the other questions that I had to do with library services during this COVID-19 pandemic. So maybe we can just focus in on some key points. So given the upcoming year will have significant financial challenges because of the situation, what library services do you think are the most important to maintain? And that's for Mr. Price first, sorry.
I'm thinking.
Okay. What would be your top priorities for maintaining services?
I think there is none. Quite frankly, I don't think any particular service is more valuable than another. But certainly one of the most valuable services that we provide is the job seekers program. And goodness knows, right now, there are probably people who are looking for work who could benefit from our program.
Okay, Ms. Claremont? The other thing that is very important is libraries are expected to maintain their collections and their hours of operation. You don't want to drop those numbers significantly because you can be decertified from the state system, which means you can't borrow other libraries. That is key. But in terms of which service is more important, the library is unusual because it services so many age groups and a diverse population, so that you can't really pinpoint one service over another.
Okay, thank you very much. And to piggyback on that, how would you propose funding these services during this time? And that would be for Ms. Claremont.
Well, the library is expected to be funded by the town. It's part of the bylaws of Massachusetts libraries. So they have to maintain a certain level of funding, again, to stay certified. The Friends and fundraising, those can add to things beyond just the basics, like museum passes, things that aren't books, music, movies, electronic materials.
Thank you. Mr. Price? Funding for activities during this COVID-19 time?
Yeah, the library service has been curtailed to a very large extent, but some of the slack has been made up by taking on new responsibilities, like providing this curbside pickup for patrons. And certainly any additional funding is difficult. It really does have to come from the town. We do have some money in the Library Foundation and in the Library Trust funds, but that's reserved for very specific purposes, and it wouldn't cover this case.
Okay. All right, and we have two last questions. One goes back to the expansion project, and I think one of you touched on it already, but how will parking be affected by the new library design? And that's for Mr. Price first.
Strangely enough, the parking problem it will not be covered by the construction plan. But in fact, by law, we cannot spend construction grant funds on parking lots. But we already have cash that we could use. No, that's not right. We do have plans which we could implement that would give us additional parking without resorting to having to wait for the grant program to come. We could have put in additional parking spaces for 9 or 12 cars already had we chosen to do that. But there was some reluctance to put in a new parking lot if we were immediately about to start off on the construction of a new library building.
Thank you, Ms. Claremont. Anything to add?
I'm actually not as familiar with the project as Bob is. I did see the plans for the project, and it shows an expansion of the building without impacting the parking, which is pretty amazing, actually. So they're using land between the building and the existing parking lot to get quite a lot of space inside. But in terms of extra parking, it's not something that I've had discussions with.
Okay. All right, we have one last question, which is about the Champion Black Oak, and people are wondering when it will be taken down. So, Ms. Claremont.
Okay, so I've gone to 2 board meetings and I have heard about the Black Oak, but I had no idea what it was before then. So I'm going to pass this question on to Bob because he knows everything about it.
And Mr.
Clever.
Price.
Yes, we realized about a year, 18 months ago that the core of the Champion Oak was rotten. And in fact, the tree was posing a threat to not only the library, but the parish church next door.
Yeah.
So we were hoping to get a tree company in this winter when the ground was frozen. We could drive over it without creating too much damage. But for whatever reason, we couldn't come to an agreement on a schedule for removing that tree. So it's still around. And since we had a very severe thunderstorm, windstorm recently, and the oak is still standing, I'm not sure we really have to worry about it. But keep your eye on this spot.
Okay. And I see Mr. Lavelle has shown up. If you want to turn your camera off for just one moment while we finish up the library trustees, that's okay. Do you, Ms. Claremont or Mr. Price, have any last comments for voters?
Just thank you again for hosting this, and I hope everyone gets out and votes.
Mr. Price?
Yeah, I remember to vote for Lynn.
Well, thank you both very much. So thank you to the candidates running for library trustees. So if the two of you can either turn your cameras off or leave the meeting. The leave the meeting button's in the bottom right, and the camera function is in the bottom left. And if the candidates for planning board could please turn on your cameras. There we go. Okay, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so next we will hear from the two candidates running for one 5-year seat on the planning board, Robert Schaffer and incumbent Gary Lavelle. Candidates, please remember to address the camera and check in with the timekeeper so that we can cover a variety of topics. Can you give me a quick wave or thumbs up if you can see the timekeeper? Okay. And just remember to, the last segment worked okay. If you don't have to mute yourselves yourselves in between questions, but if you start getting some feedback or some noise, just remember to mute yourself when you're not speaking. So we're going to start with opening statements. Mr. Lavelle, you'll go first. You have 2 minutes, and then we'll go back and forth in terms of who answers the questions first. So Mr. Lavelle, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. First of all, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for having me here tonight for the opportunity to speak. I just want to say I've been a resident of Westford almost my entire life. I'm a business owner in town, and I also currently hold a seat on the planning board, on the permanent town building committee. As a lifelong resident of Westford, I have seen many changes through the years. Some I have approved of, and some I have not. As a current business owner, my job allows me to interact with businesses and residents of Westford on a daily basis. Whether it's a mom coming to pick up her uniform for her son's local baseball league, a landscaping company coming to pick up their spring order, or most recently working with the Westford Academy principal and hand delivering 430 signs that will be used to decorate the town common for the graduates of 2020. Local interaction is very important when you're holding a seat on a board in your community. I feel I accomplish that on a daily basis. I think the major reason I should continue on this board is the interaction I have between the planning board and the permanent town building committee. The insight I am able to offer on the permanent town building committee on how the planning board will react to a current town project is beneficial in many ways moving forward for our town and our community. I thank you all again for having me here tonight, and I hope for your vote.
Thank you. Mr. Schaffer?
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Bob Schaffer, candidate for planning board. First, let me thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. I've been a resident of Westford for almost 23 years now, and I'm running for planning board at this time because I believe I can bring some new energy and provide some effective participation, knowledge, and my skills to some critical activities for planning in the town of Westford. This is an interesting time in our nation, in our Commonwealth, and in our town, and there are many new challenges we're going to have to react to. I believe my past performance demonstrates my ability to think out of the box and work as a team member to find creative solutions to problems. I've served in the past as a member of the Finance Committee, Planning Board, Route 110 Master Plan Committee, Master Plan Implementation Committee, Community Preservation Committee, for which I was the very first inaugural chair back in 2001. I also was I also chaired the Citizens Committee to adopt, and I championed the adoption of CPA here in Westford back in 2001. I served on the Stupinski Land Acquisition Committee. I also served on the Historical Commission and served as a chair. I also started my participation in Westford as a board member for the Westford Networks for Education and Technology. I believe I want to really emphasize my ability to work as a team player. In all of these past experiences, it was working as a team where we had the success we had, whether it was adopting new bylaws, drafting design standards for the Route 110 corridor, or crafting new bylaws such as the mill reuse design bylaws, senior residential multifamily overlay district, flexible development, or updating of the Westford zoning bylaws. And lastly, I just want to also emphasize the work I was able to do with the Academy on the construction of the bandstand back in 2008 as the chair of the Historical Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Mr. Schaffer, you'll answer this question
Yes.
first, and then Mr. Lavelle. So what would be some of your top goals for your 5-year term? And you have 1 minute.
I think the first one here is probably to help the planning board react to COVID-19. We've got a unique time right now, and we are going to have to respond to that challenge. One of those areas is in the area of the site plan review. Site plan review is probably going to have to be modified. We're going to have to look at new evaluation criteria for such things as social distancing, both inside and outside of a business, look at curbside pickup and that impact. Potentially, I would expect we might see a proposal come back for a drive-through windows for restaurants. This was last turned down in '98, but again, in this time of social distancing and parents concerned about the health of their children, we need to do everything we can to address health and safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lavelle?
Well, unlike Mr. Schaefer, we have been. I feel COVID right now is a short-term fix for the town because there will be a vaccine soon, and that will all be irrelevant in a couple of years. But moving forward, we have been working on a lot of modification for the bylaws. There's a lot of stuff in process for the town. I feel moving forward, the town's a 5-year project, and if I am reelected, that's where we look is in the 5-year term. We're looking for. It is a different time now. We have unique pieces of property that we're dealing with. We have a lot of different zones of the town, and we have a lot of modifications going on. And I feel I'm embedded very deeply right now with those conversations with the planning board and other parts of this town. It would probably not be in the best interest of the town to release me from the board right now.
All right, thank you very much. So Mr. Lavelle, this question will go to you first, and we're switching to the topic of green space. How would you go about preserving green space in Westford so as to maintain a connection to Westford's rural past?
That is that is always the biggest topic when a project comes to our committee, and that is something that's very sensitive for everybody on the committee. We try to preserve as much green space as possible. A lot more of our projects have been going towards the open space. We are trying to keep these open space projects workable so they can connect with any of the town and any of the existing trails that are in town. We are trying to put in sidewalks to complement everything else, and we are trying to, believe it or not, we do site walks for all these proposals, and we try to pick and choose trees, specific trees we'd like these developers to keep, stone walls, and any type of history we can preserve in the town of Westford is something that we want to do. It is very sensitive to me because, like I said, I've been here since 1972. I have family in town, and it's very, very sensitive to me.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schaffer?
Thank you. First and foremost, I think we need to partner with Conservation Commission, partner with the Westford Land Trust in addressing those critical spaces that they see as the priority to preserve. Secondly, we have a number of planning tools that allow us flexibility to maintain green space within new developments. We have things like the flexible development bylaw, which allows certain parcels to be prioritized or sub-parcels to be prioritized over others. And we also have the master plan. We need to continue updating that master plan and the sidewalk master plan so that we continue to prioritize the preservation of green space in those areas that we deem to be of the highest priority. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the next question will go to Mr. Schaffer. We'll go to you first,
Yep.
And it's about affordable housing. So even though Westford now exceeds the state required minimum of 10% of our housing being classified as affordable, do you think the town has adequate affordable housing? And if not, what can the planning board do to encourage the building of more affordable housing?
I think that's an interesting question. The term adequate is always subjective, and I think we can always do more to help our residents, to help the children of our residents find affordable housing in Westford. So we need to continue to be aggressive. Affordable housing also does not necessarily stay on the books forever. So it's important to continue to identify those options that increase the affordable housing base so that we don't end up in the situation we were in 10 years ago where we didn't have control over affordable housing projects in all cases under some of the state guidelines. So I think we have to look for those opportunities when we can partner with developers and include an affordable housing component in any new development that they propose. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lavelle?
Affordable housing is dictated by the state. We work on a weekly basis with developers and anybody who brings a project to town in this forum to do the best we can to. It's a sensitive area. A lot of people aren't for affordable housing, but it's a necessary evil, and we try to work best with the developers as these projects come before us. our hands are kind of tied because there is a certain number, and we have to work with what we have. And the land parcels in Westford are limited, but when they do come in front of us, we have to make decisions, and we try to work with the developers the best we can on them.
Thank you very much. So Mr. Lavelle, you'll answer the next question first, and it's about citizen participation. How would you encourage more citizen participation in your decision-making processes?
I'd like to see more people show up at our meetings. We have a lot of input, but I'd like to see positive input instead of negative input. Everybody that seems to show up in front of the boards is negative. And that's not always the case. We want to encourage, we want to control and maintain development in the town of Westford. Everything's not bad that comes to the town of Westford, and that's what I feel everybody sees, whether it's commercial buildings, whether it's another development in town, or whether it's somebody wants to put up, something in their house. We need to have more positive feedback from the town of where we want to go. We can't stop people from building. We can only, guide them and help them, get what they're trying to obtain, with at the same time, keep Westford, to the proper aesthetics that we want to have it.
Thank you. Mr. Schaffer?
So I think it's more than just looking at the citizen participation that comes to complain or voice concerns about the projects. The work of the planning board is more than just that. Some of the work that the planning board will be doing in the areas of master planning, of zoning changes, subdivision guidelines, whether, as I said, when we did the Citizen Preservation Act back in 2001, one of the things I did a lot of was go out and advocate to different groups and discuss these topics with them. So I went out to the Senior Citizens Center for different lunches and dinners and spoke with the senior citizens, or I would go out to a school PTA or a sports night and talk to them if the topic was applicable. So when we were talking about some of the new fields, we went to some of the sporting events. So I think part of that, and also going out to the neighborhoods, when we have a new development, go out and talk with the neighbors. You can go door to door and just start talking to them about something and get their opinion. So you can be proactive by just going out into the field, so to speak, and meeting with those neighbors, and not just hopefully inviting them to a meeting to complain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're going to switch topics. Again, there are a lot of different questions for these candidates. The next question will go to you, Mr. Schaffer, first. Are we doing enough to monitor and enforce the restrictions put in place on the Newport Materials asphalt plant?
I think at this time, I think we are. I think we have to wait and see when the plant goes operational and then start evaluating to see how the procedures that we're utilizing are working. At this time, as my understanding, the plant's not operational, so it's hard to say that we do not have enough. When this was first proposed, 2 or 3 years ago, I was very impressed by what the selectmen and the planning board at that time had negotiated for those controls with Newport. I think they were a pretty aggressive set of controls, and I think they allowed a lot of visibility by the town, by the inspectors, and by the boards into that operation, and it would allow to watch for any indicators that indicated negative aspects of that operation on the town of Westford and on our neighboring town of Chelmsford, which is resident very close.
Get me on that other page so I can unmute myself.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Schaffer, are you all set?
Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
Okay, I'm not sure. Yeah, Mr. Lavelle, just mute yourself if you're going to talk because it interrupts there. So, Mr. Lavelle, what are your thoughts on the Newport Materials asphalt plant?
I don't really think it's really not an issue for the current board right now because the guidelines have been set. Are we keeping intact the guidelines that have been set from the current board? Yes, we are. Moving forward with everything that's going on, we are trying to be. This is another sensitive area with the trucks leaving, and yes, have we taken a little bit of the necessities away from what's going on for which way the trucks are going and the car counts and everything else. Yet we feel that we currently doing what is proper for what's going on with Newport Materials. We can only do so much because the previous boards are the ones who enacted what is going on right now. There's really nothing else we can do. We have a chance to move forward. Would we do it differently? I don't know, because I wasn't involved with the first decisions. I would have to look deeper, but what we are currently doing now is, is holding the guidelines from what they previously said.
Thank you very much. So, we have two questions left. Mr. Lavelle, you'll answer this one first. With so many empty storefronts in Westford's commercial districts, what, if any, zoning bylaw changes would you support to encourage more businesses to locate and remain in town?
I'm sorry. I was the president of the Westford Business Association about 2 years ago. And we've talked about this many times. There was a lot of subcommittees that were going on, and we've tried, endlessly to bring new business into Westford. Westford is a little bit, higher end price for everybody. We need to find a way to get the pricing down a little bit to be more competitive with our surrounding towns, and we've always tried to find a way to do that. We've been working with the mill projects over in Forge. We work with a couple other big businesses in town. We reach out to the Middlesex divisions. It's an ongoing situation, and I don't think there's really an answer for it. We just have to try to find a way to get ourselves more competitively active with the surrounding towns.
Thank you. Mr. Schaffer?
So I think before you go and start proposing zoning changes, I think we have to do some research to find why a business might not be coming in and occupying those spaces. So that means reaching out to the realtors, maybe reaching out to some of the town employees, the inspectors who are on the front lines and can tell us what the obstacles are to bringing new business into town. In addition to zoning, it's also a matter of working with the select board to look at tax incentives that can be combined with these changes. I think also, as I said earlier, relative to COVID, I think we're going to start to see new changes in ideas of curbside pickup, and that's going to affect some of the traffic densities, parking densities. And so we're going to have to be creative in working with businesses that would come into town to work in this new way of doing business. Because even if we have a vaccine in a year and a half, I think we're going to have a new way of doing business from this way forward relative to pandemics and infection rates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So our last question, and Mr. Schaffer, you'll answer first. What is your position on allowing short-term rentals in Westford?
I think it would depend upon what you mean by short-term rental. I am somewhat opposed to having short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods. I think it would have to be highly regulated. It has caused problems, I know, in some neighborhoods in the past where there was a transient population. It would obviously require a lot of regulation with the homeowner who is doing the rental, and there would have to be a lot of oversight and monitoring to ensure that we do not impact our abutters who are the long-term residents in that neighborhood, because first and foremost, they're the ones that are the most important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lavelle.
This is a current topic on the planning board. We recently voted not to allow short-term rentals. I don't know the exact specifics of it, but we recently voted to not allow short-term rentals for less than 30 days. There was a lot of talk about it, a lot of conversation about it. My stand on was there are hotels and there are other businesses in town that have the 1, 2 night, 3 night stays, a little bit longer term than that. And I don't think in any way it's fair to step on these businesses' toes to allow these short-term rentals. So I was in favor of this 30-day proposal, and I'm sure the public will be made aware of this sometime soon.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll now begin with closing statements, and Mr. Schaffer, you'll go first. You have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you very much. Just thank you again for the league hosting this forum. And I just really want to emphasize the vast experience I've had in the area of planning and working in town with the different boards. relative to planning, the master plan, sidewalk master plan, Route 110. We still have some interesting challenges here with respect to Drew Farm, with respect to sidewalk connections up Boston Road coming in the next few years with the reconstruction of Boston Road, and also looking to the south of town where we have some trails and sidewalks that still are not connected per that plan. And as we emphasized in talked about in one of the first questions, how we continue to increase and improve upon our inventory of green space within the town of Westford, and how we continue to bring in new businesses and encourage businesses to stay. I think it's very important that we look at the balance of services to our residents, as well as the convenience that these businesses provide residents within the town of Westford. I think we're going to have some interesting challenges in the next year. I suspect that with the impact of the pandemic, we are going to see a number of businesses unfortunately not make it, probably leave or fail altogether. And so we are going to have to deal with an increased inventory of available office and business space. That's going to bring some new challenges to the boards, the planning board, the ZBA, as there are change of use requests. And there's going to be a demand maybe for some changes in zoning. And we're going to have to react to that. Some of that can't be forecast. Some of that is reactionary. And so I look forward to being able to serve the town of Westford and its residents, and in providing that service through the planning board and providing my wealth of experience to bear on these problems. Again, I look forward to you coming up to vote for me on June 30th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lavelle?
Again, I'll reiterate what I said in my opening statements. I am a member of the Permanent Town Building Committee. And as everyone knows, the Permanent Town Building Committee, does all the municipal buildings and so forth. I work very closely with the Permanent Town Building Committee and the members of that board, as well as the planning board. Currently, I'm the liaison for the WA project of the sports field. I am a member of the Merrill's Quarry subcommittee, and there's a lot of projects right now that I have my hands pretty deep in, and I don't feel it would be in the town's best interest to uproot me now from the planning board with projects that are going on that I am involved in right now, because I don't feel it would leave a fair balance on the town, on the applicants who have already submitted their applications, and where we're going to go with the future. There's a lot of unique, all the good pieces of land in Westford are gone. There's a lot of unique stuff coming up. I feel that I've educated myself very well on the bylaws of the zoning and what is going on. I'm working closely with the board right now to check out some of the zoning laws and maybe restructure a few of them. I just feel right now isn't a good time to take me off the board. I feel I'm doing a superb job of being there, and I look forward to you voting for me at the end of the month. And I hope everybody stays safe.
Thank you very much. So thank you both, the candidates running for the planning board. And if you two could please turn off your cameras or leave the meeting. And if the candidates for moderator could please turn on your cameras.
I'll do that.
Yep, so it's at the bottom left. There we go. Ms. Spooler, hi. Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh. There we go. Can everyone hear me okay?
Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So during our next panel this evening, you will be hearing from the two candidates running for a 3-year term as moderator, Angela Harkness and incumbent Susan McNeil Spooler. We will begin with our opening statements, and Ms. Harkness, you will go first. Candidates, please remember to address the camera and check in with the timekeeper so that we can cover a variety of topics. Are you both able to see Joanna Myers?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, so Ms. Harkness, you have 2 minutes.
Well, first, thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this candidates night. And thank you also to the League for their continuing efforts to keep us informed to encourage us to vote and to safeguard our right to do so. As I read and listened to the news in the last week or so, I was struck by the gravity of what's going on nationally. Events so serious that they make this race for town moderator seem almost unimportant by comparison. But that's not true. Our local elections and our participation in them underpins our democracy. We have to get it right at this level in order for government to succeed at the federal and state levels. We have to show that it can work. And that's why I'm running for moderator. Town meeting is our legislative body. It creates and passes the laws that govern our community. It determines how our children are educated, how much we pay in taxes, and how those taxes are spent. The town moderator is charged with ensuring the town meeting is run efficiently and effectively. And I think I can do that. I've loved living in Westford for these last 30 years. I've served on many different boards and committees, and I've participated regularly in town meeting. I love the Apple Blossom Parade, the Parish Center for the Arts, the history of our different villages, the Westford Museum. I love everything about Westford. And most of all, I love town meeting. I believe I have a broad perspective, which I think is essential to serving as moderator. Town meeting is the purest form of democracy. Every person has a voice and every person has a vote. The moderator must make sure that everyone is heard, that matters are discussed openly and expeditiously, that conversation is civil and fair, and that votes are accurately counted. People attending must be confident in the process, comfortable enough to participate, and they must leave with a sense of accomplishment that convinces them it's worthwhile to come back. So thank you for listening to this forum, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Ms. Spooler?
Can you see me and hear me?
You're very quiet.
Okay, I'll speak louder.
That's better.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank the Westford League of Women Voters, WestfordCAT, and for all of you who are watching this event. I'm Westford Town Moderator Susan McNeil Spooler, and I'm running for re-election. My husband Tom and I have lived in Westford since 2001. During the past 3 years that I've been in service to our town, I have implemented many positive changes for our town meetings. While polling voters, I found that some had a hard time seeing and hearing at town meeting. I saw to it that all town meeting presentations had the font sizes increased. I provide reading glasses at all town meetings of various prescription strengths for the voters, and with the help of the Cameron Senior Center, hearing assistance devices are made available. I've also provided custom-made hand fans with caricatures of historical figures and interesting historical facts. As we know, town meeting can get rather heated at times. In addition, I arrange for an affordable lunch for all at town meeting. One of my responsibilities as town moderator is to appoint Westford voters to the Finance Committee. I'm proud to say that the Finance Committee is the most diverse committee in town. Currently, I volunteer for the Massachusetts Moderator Association as chairperson of the membership committee. I attend all annual, regional moderator meetings and events. Given the current situation, I've been working closely with dozens of other moderators around the state, as well as Westford town officials to put together a safe town meeting. Safety and health rules are constantly changing, and I want to assure you that your safety is first and foremost on the agenda. Town meeting will occur on Saturday, June 20th, 2020 at 9 a.m. at the Westford Academy football field. All safety precautions will be implemented. My past town volunteerism includes serving as vice chair for both the Master Plan Implementation Committee and the Registered Marijuana Dispensary Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're going to begin with you, Ms. Spooler, with the first question, and then we'll alternate who answers first. The next questions have to do with town meeting. So do you support instituting electronic voting at town meeting? And if yes, in what circumstances should it be used?
I was on the committee that we were looking at electronic voting, and I found it to be quite effective. I've attended many town meetings around the state where they have it, and the time that it would be most effective is apparently when Angela's on screen. Anyways, that's great.
Sorry.
Is when we have to if it's not clear when we ask for a vote, all in favor say aye, and all opposed say nay. And if it sounds very close, and then at that point in time, then I would ask for an electronic vote to be in place, because we found last time at a couple of town meetings that it was within a couple of votes that a motion passed or failed. So it would be in that stance when it was very close.
Okay,
So I
thank
feel
you.
it's important that people can use their voices.
Thank you. Ms. Harkness?
Well, I think that we have to be careful about implementing a new way of voting without the voters being comfortable in terms of how it's going to end and whether or not they feel it's appropriate. And if it seemed as though electronic voting were something we wanted to implement, I think I would want to start with a broad education policy so that the community understands what's going to happen. And allow the community, after being to vote on whether they wanted to do it or not. There are, as Susan said, certain ways of getting into that wouldn't be all or nothing, perhaps voting, using it only for votes that would result in a count by the tellers, or something else that would be very time consuming if we weren't using electronic voting. But I think the question is really up to the voters to decide.
Thank you very much. The next question will go to you, Ms. Harkness, first, and they are both about efficiency at town meeting. So can you suggest any changes to town meetings procedures or town bylaws that could make town meeting run more efficiently?
Well, there's always got to be a balance between efficiency and fair discussion. People are entitled to have their voices heard. That's what town meeting is all about. You want to make sure that you're gathering opinion and allowing enough voters to speak so that people don't feel left out, don't feel that their voice wasn't heard. But at the same time, you want the meeting to be not excessively long so that people don't feel like they can't do it because it takes too much of their time. That's a balance that has to be weighed, I think, at each meeting. You know, there's certainly a possibility that electronic voting could make our meetings more efficient. But going back to what I said in the last question, I think that that question involves some public education and a vote by the community, by the vote of town meeting before we implement that.
Ms. Spooler?
Running town meeting, you're walking a fine line, as Angela said, that you want to let people express their opinion, but then sometimes people get up to the microphone and say, oh, I agree with the person in front of me who just spoke. And so you have to, so then it's, you know, it's very tricky then to, you know, say, okay, thank you very much for your opinion. But we do want to let people talk and express what they've done and research that they've done on any given motion that's on the floor. So I'm all for letting people express themselves to their full capacity, unless they're repeating themselves. But that's where the great town meeting is, you know, moves forward, and we're here to express our opinions and everything. Thank you.
Thank you. So as a follow-up to that question, and Ms. Spooler, you'll answer this first, how would you prioritize then efficiency, voter participation, and maybe review of the warrant articles? How would you prioritize those? Review
of the warrant articles is always something that the League of Women Voters always helps with, and that's very important. We always all attend that. It's televised. The voters are allowed to come and participate and ask questions if they're not sure about a particular article. So as for prioritizing, if the voters are educated and aware of what's before them, then they can make a wiser choice in their voting.
Thank you. Ms. Harkness?
I think prioritization has to go to the voice of the voters first. There's certainly some sifting that has to be done in terms of not allowing points to be unnecessarily repeated or not allowing the same person to talk over and over again. But even with those in mind, the voice of the voters at town meeting has to be the primary priority.
Thank you. And Ms. Harkness, this question will go to you. This is also about town meeting. Attendance at town meeting is historically 3 to 4%. How might you engage more voters in the town meeting process?
Well, I do have some ideas about that. The first one is I think we need to remember that Westford has a very high percentage of families with young children. And while we always provide a babysitting service, I think we could do better with that. Maybe in conjunction with the recreation department, we could actually create a program for the day or evening of town meeting that has interesting activities for the kids and is more than just babysitting, because if the kids wanted to go, their parents would be more likely to bring them. In addition to that, I think we can do a better job educating people as to what the issues are that are going to be discussed at town meeting by mailing, by having various forums, so that people become more interested in the details of what's going to be voted on, and as a result are more likely to attend. So those are a couple of ideas that I have.
Thank you, Ms. Spooler.
Well, I've been constantly giving public service announcements, letting people know when town meeting is, when different events are coming up, and any various changes that are happening regarding town meeting. So, and I would answer questions on Facebook, and I would continue to answer questions on Facebook when people had questions. I would answer them privately, depending on how volatile a question was. So, but I agree with Angela that we should try to do some sort of program with for the children. I know that sometimes when the League of Women Voters has had, when they've offered babysitting, only one child would show up, and there's a lot of planning that goes into that, and it's unfortunate. And I'm just wondering too, is that, you know, how much are we going to charge for the babysitting, and if people at this point in time may be out of work, would they be would they get some sort of a scholarship, or would we offer it for free, or make a donation, have people be able to make a donation or whatever they could afford if they had a couple of children that needed to be babysat during town meeting.
Thank you very much. And the next question will go to you, Ms. Spooler, first. What can the town moderator also do to increase civility at town meeting?
Well, I always try to be very kind and very polite to people, but I think that there needs to be other folks in the audience that will, you know, regarding peer pressure, that they should just kind of say, look, this is not acceptable. And, you know, we're all neighbors. Many of us are friends. And I understand when people get upset and heated. However, when people, you know, yell at people and tell them to be quiet and sit down, that's not acceptable. And that's where I'm hoping that moving forward that people will learn that, you know, we're here to all work together. We're here to do all of our voting, to do what's best for Westford, and that they can extend their heart and be kinder and gentler towards their fellow neighbors.
Okay, Ms. Harkness.
Well, foremost, I think that the best way to promote civility is to model civility. I think it's incumbent on the moderator to make sure that the moderator is civil and polite at all times. And also, as Susan's indicated, to set out right at the start the rule that incivility won't be tolerated. It doesn't add anything to the conversation. It doesn't bring any facts to the voting, and it just needs to be shut down when it happens, and in a polite but firm way, so that it doesn't happen again.
Thank you very much. We have just a couple more town meeting questions, and then we'll switch topics. What role do you think historical knowledge of past town meetings, warrant articles, and decisions play in guiding the moderator's running of town meeting? Or maybe you have some other things that help guide you in your running of town meeting. What are those? And that's for Ms. Spooler first.
Well, I've been attending town meetings for over 15 years, and it's always interesting to see, and, you know, to be a part of the town meetings, and then to be able to understand the temperature of the town when it comes to certain questions and certain motions that are on the floor, and then articles, because, you know, when we know that some of them are more passionately looked after, there'll be signs around town, and people will have handouts outside of town meeting, and then just knowing how over time, some things keep coming back and coming back and coming back. And then knowing how people will vote on that, or knowing their, understanding what their reactions will be, will help to temper things. So just being aware of, okay, this article is on the warrant, and this is what's happened in the past, and then just being aware and kind of setting some guidelines and rules as to, okay, this is what we'll do moving forward when the motion's on the floor.
Thank you. Ms. Harkness?
I think that historical knowledge of town meeting is very important and can provide a lot of guidance. In addition to the fact that we are so lucky to have our long-term moderator, Ellen Hardy, living here in town, who I know is willing to provide guidance to any town moderator or anybody seeking to be town moderator. Historical knowledge of what's happened at prior town meetings is of course important, because as Susan said, if something comes up again, there's a historical background that you can rely on. And it's always interesting to hear somebody stand at the microphone and talk about a town meeting they were at 5 or 10 or 20 years ago, and when a particular subject was raised there, what happened. May not be always 100% reliable, but it's always interesting to hear those conversations.
Thank you very much. Last town meeting question. And I think you've talked about this a little bit maybe, but if you have anything else to add, and this will go to Ms. Harkness first, how would you ensure that voters at town meeting have an understanding of the procedures so that they can participate effectively? So is there anything else you'd like to add about that?
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in public education. I think voters are capable, intelligent, and able to vote on things when they have the appropriate background and knowledge. So we do a great job putting out our warrant and our FinCom book. I think we could do a better job educating people about the other topics that are coming up. Because if you don't attend selectmen's meetings, or if you don't watch Conservation Commission meetings, you may not have any understanding of an issue that's coming up relative to that board or that committee. Whereas if there was some little blurb put out to everyone about the different warrant articles that were coming up, in addition to the FinCom handbook, I think we would have a more educated voting body, and it would take us less time to get to the point, to get to the vote.
Ms. Spooler?
Going back to what the League of Women Voters does, they have their meeting to be able to explain and go through each and every article. And I do agree that there could be something put out for the town, and then perhaps League of Women Voters could make a donation towards that, because I know we're always up against various budgetary constraints. But it is important to let people know what's going on out there. And when I've done my public service announcements, I will kind of, talk about or just mention that we'll be voting on paper bags or styrofoam or whatever it is that we're working on. That's kind of one of the forefront. It's on the forefront of what's on people's minds and what they're interested in most of the time.
Thank you very much. Okay, and let's see. I think we're going to switch topics now to the Finance Committee. So this would be to Ms. Spooler first. So what qualities and qualifications would you look for, or do you look for when appointing Finance Committee members?
Well, can you hear me?
Ms. Yep.
Well, first of all, I look for people who are available, because there's a lot of time that needs to be dedicated to the Finance Committee. And a lot of the people that are on the Finance Committee already come forth. There'll be CFOs, there'll be accountants, and some are actually engineers. So I want people who have a good grasp of finances, who have worked with budgets that are in the tens of millions, because with our budget ours being over $120 million, you don't want to just work with people that have just done, it is always helpful to have people who work with smaller budgets and have the experience of working a business of various sizes. But it's important for them to know that they'll be working with a team. They're working with a team, that they can get along well with people, that there may not be people that will agree with them on all aspects. But then if they really feel strongly about a certain point, that they feel that they can stand up and say, look, I really feel this way. And, you know, most of you may not agree with me. However, this is my experience, and this is where I feel that we should make our decision. So it's people that have time on their hands, that they can devote to the meetings, that have analytical minds, that have experience with finances. And then a lot of times you want some people that are somewhat new to town, maybe, you know, within a few years, they've lived here for a few years, but they're very, very interested, and they've come to lots of town meetings. And that's another thing. Have they ever been to town meeting? Are they a registered voter? They need to be a registered voter to be on the finance committee. So, so there's a lot of questions, and then just their personality, and you can tell that they'll be willing to vote with to work with others on the committee, and knowing what the culture of the current finance committee is.
Thank you. Ms. Harkness, and if you need extra time, that's fine.
Thanks. Well, it is important to have people on the finance committee who have a financial or management or budgeting background and experience. It's also important, I think, to get people from all different segments of the community, because our budget, of course, deals with things that affect all different segments of the community. So, for example, people with children in the schools, senior citizens who are living on a fixed income, people who have children who have grown but want to relocate in town. It's very important to have that type of diversity on the finance committee, in addition, of course, to people representing different segments of town and different groups in town. And those are the things I would look for.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're at our last question, then we'll do our closing statements. And Ms. Harkness, you'll go first. Do you support a change to representative town government?
So my personal feeling is that I do not support a change to representative town government. A few years ago, we had a committee who looked into that and decided, I believe unanimously, that that was not appropriate, made that report to town meeting, and it was accepted at town meeting. I think town meeting as it exists now is something that draws us together as a community. It's an integral part of the fabric of our community, and I think it would be a significant loss if we didn't have it. That being said, that is not a decision the moderator would make. That is, of course, a decision for the voters.
Thank you. Ms. Spooler?
So after attending town meeting for the year, all the time I've been there, all these years, people want their voices heard. And with representative town meeting, you're choosing a certain percentage of your precinct to go and represent you, but you don't know if they'll vote the way you want them to vote on certain articles. So knowing how passionate people are here in Westford, I would be very surprised if the voters went towards a representative town meeting. And as Angela said, it's not my decision. It's the voters' decision. But I'd be very surprised to see that happening within, say, the next 10 or 20 years.
Thank you very much. So we will now end this panel with closing statements. You will each have 2 minutes for your statements, and we'll start with you, Ms. Spooler. Okay. When you are ready.
Okay. Again, I would like to thank the League of Women Voters as well as WestfordCAT and those watching. My priority is to continue to improve my running of town meeting with the continued coaching of current and past moderators. I've been a fair town moderator and recognize the learning curve that goes along with this position. There's always something new to learn. I recognize and I address those challenges. Everyone is equal and has the right to express their point of view. That is the historical essence of town meeting. I will continue to preserve the independent oversight capability of town moderator. I create my own schedule and work from home, making me available during the workday and evenings for any issues that need attention. If you have any questions, please email me at susan.mcneil.spooler@gmail.com or call me at 978-340-9304. It has been an honor and a privilege serving as your town moderator since 2017. I ask for your vote, and I thank you for your vote.
Thank you very much. Ms. Harkness? You have 2 minutes.
Thanks again to the League for hosting this event. Especially in these difficult times, I so appreciate the effort being made by people to participate in our local elections, to educate themselves about the candidates and the issues, and most of all, to vote. As a longtime Westford resident, a local small business owner, an active participant in town events, and an avid supporter of our community, I'm excited about the possibility of serving as your town moderator. I look forward to facilitating town meeting discussions and to working with you to make town meeting more accessible and user-friendly. So I hope I can count on your vote. You can get an absentee ballot from the town clerk's office right now or vote in person on June 30th. Stay healthy, stay safe, and please stay involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you to both of you, the candidates running for moderator, and stay tuned for part 2 of the Westford Candidates Forum featuring the candidates for Select Board and School Committee. So we will now begin with opening statements. They will be done in alphabetical order. So Mr. Benoit, you will go first. You have 2 minutes.
So I'd like to welcome all those watching and to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting the Candidates Night. This has been a year of tumultuous turmoil. The pandemic has obviously affected budgets. It's not unlike any other years in the past, but yet it is. There's been, I'm sure, a huge shortfall in the financial, the town's financial picture, which for Westford doesn't seem all that different from the many years that I sat on the committee in the past. It always seems like there's some level of expectation going into the year and something happens and these things change pretty rapidly, and keeping up with the changes really becomes a challenge when you're limited to a number that the town manager assigns to each department. Oftentimes it's not enough to cover what programs you had in the previous year, but this year seems to be even more fraught with those, I guess, pitfalls based on the pandemic. My personal feeling is the way that you deal with this is to build relationships within the town's administration with other departments throughout the town, and to find ways within the budget to do things more creative or creatively than we've done in the past. It's not always easy to do that. A lot of times it takes, a huge amount of effort, meeting with staff, meeting with the schools, meeting with administration in the schools to really understand what the problem is, and then taking that information that you've learned to the town's government and the administration of the town's government and work with them on what we can try to save. I don't see the person who's
The timekeeper?
yeah.
Oh, okay. So yes, you're out of time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. You might want to change if you're not in gallery mode, you might want to change to gallery mode, and then you can see everybody at once. So give that a try while we're moving on. Okay, Ms. Chaffee,
Yes.
you're next. You have 2 minutes and some extra seconds too.
Okay, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for hosting this Zoom to get to know us. I'm very nervous, as you can see, so bear with me a minute. My name is Janelle Chaffee, and I'm very excited at the prospect of representing the town of Westford on a 3-year term for school committee. I'd like to share a little bit about myself. I've lived in Westford for the last 16 years with my husband, Michael, and my 3 children. I have 2 10th graders at WA, almost juniors, and a 6th grader at Blanchard. They've been in the Westford school system since preschool, since we were here. My background experience as far as being on other boards is I've been on 3 boards in the past. Neshoba Youth Hockey, I was treasurer for the Westford Elementary PTO, and president of Breaston's Gymnastics Parents Association. And I've worked for a foundation for the last 26 years, and I've had experiences with educational budgets from BC, Harvard, and Suffolk Law School with the programs that my office funds. And I really don't know what my platform is running for school committee, since I don't really think you know what you're in for until you're in it. I do hope to be a listener and to judge my opinions with facts. Well, I guess my platform with facts, not with opinions, and to better the Westford community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kravitz.
Hello, my name's Paul Kravitz, and I'm running for school committee. First, I would like to thank everyone in our community for supporting the continuation of learning through the pandemic, the teachers, the students, and the children, and the parents. It has not been easy on anyone, and your dedication to our children's education has been extraordinary. Over the course of this discussion, I hope that my remarks will give you a better understanding of who I am and why I have elected to be a candidate this year. I have 2 daughters in our school system, a school system that attracted us to Westford 9 years ago. I have a professional background in medical product research and in handling customer feedback. This has helped me develop my skills to become adept at analyzing data and constructively implementing real use feedback. Up until this school year, I was not involved in town politics or the school committee, as the systems in place seemed to be working well. It wasn't until watching and attending school committee meetings this fall, winter, and spring that I became frustrated with the lack of transparency provided for decisions being made and the obvious misalignment between the community's desires and the school committee's agenda. I want to restore and renew the transparency and trust that we have come to expect and our community deserves to the school committee. A vote for me is a vote for the success of our schools. A vote for me is a vote for our children's futures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Miller?
Good evening. My name's Gloria Miller, and my husband and Darren and I have lived in Westford since 2007. We, like many people, moved here for the schools. Anyone who knows me will not be surprised to know there were spreadsheets involved in that decision. I'm a former attorney and law professor, and I have a bachelor's and master's degree in psychology. I have 3 children who have spanned, all grades, K through 12. So I guess collectively, over 30 plus parent years in Westford Public Schools. And during that time, I've been a classroom mom, and I've sold theater tickets, and now I'm a member of the school committee for the past 3 years. And I've really seen being a member of school committee as an opportunity to give back to the school system that gave my children so much, and as a way to give back to the community, despite all of the hard work and long meetings and sometimes controversies. As a member of school committee, I have supported a school budget that tries to maximize student success while balancing our fiscal challenges. I've advocated for special education funding, and I have served as a co-lead with the superintendent of successful teacher contract negotiations And I have also promoted improved processes and fiscal policies in my role this year as chair of the policy subcommittee. So thank you again to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event tonight. And I look forward to having an interesting discussion about the future of Westford Public Schools.
Thank you. Ms. Young?
Hi, my name is Valerie Young, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters and WestfordCAT for making this virtual alternative possible to the traditional candidates night. I decided to join this race late in early March, but once I did, I submitted my 50 signatures in only 2 days because I put my all into everything I do. I've been involved with my kids' school since they started attending. I'm on the board of directors at Westford Preschool at St. Mark's, and I've served on the Nabnasset School Advisory Council. I'm a member of the Nabnasset PTO and an active volunteer in my child's classroom, and even created an after-school Lego club at his request. I hear from many parents of young children about how hard it is to stay engaged with the issues affecting local schools. It's hard to follow along with what's happening, let alone to feel confident enough to ask a question. And the evening meetings are tough to get to, especially for busy families and those with young children. But these are the very voices that need to be included. I'm passionate about finding ways to increase the communication with the community. In fact, I recently spearheaded the effort to send the mail-in application ballot to over 6,000 homes in Westford through the Action Unlimited advertising paper. I'm running because we need invested committee members that are committed to the long term to face the tough challenges ahead. I may be a new face, but I've done my homework. I've been attending school committee meetings all year long to give me the context and knowledge, and I'm ready to hit the ground running. I'm dedicated and passionate, and I'm in this for the long haul. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can everyone see the timekeeper now?
Yes.
Okay, fabulous. All right, so we'll move on to questions. So you'll each have up to 1 minute to answer each question. Ms. Chaffee, you'll answer this question first. What motivated you to run for school committee this year?
Well, I think for me, to have a voice, you need to have a seat at the table to really truly understand what's going on behind a closed door or within a committee. And to really voice an opinion, you need to be at as many, I need to be part of it. So I thought, what better way than to throw my name into the hat? I was very nervous at first. The more I got to know about what I was researching, the more I realized I didn't know, and the more I had to research about how the schools run and what happens. So my goal, the reason why I'm running is because I feel that there's a certain student population that's not represented on the school committee. I provide a different demographic. The different demographic I believe that I provide is the belief in athletics, especially at the high school level with being part of a team. A fresh look at a fresh perspective on things, and with my foundation background, I believe that we haven't exhausted all the opportunities that Westford can utilize.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, Mr. Kravitz.
Right. So what motivated me to run this year was, again, the lack of transparency that I saw and the divide that's been growing between the school committee and the community. I feel that there are a lot of important issues that have been part of the school committee's purview over the last several years. And I feel that and in talking with a lot of people in town, I've also come to learn that there's been some dissatisfaction with how some of the things have been handled. In particular, our ability to ensure level services for our schools, the way in which our superintendent situation was handled this year, and amongst others, but those in particular. And I look forward to being part of working to improve that process and the relationship.
Thank you very much. Ms. Miller?
Hi. Why am I running? I've been a member of school committee for 3 years, and when I initially ran, I really ran to focus on mental health and wellness for all of our students at the elementary level. I think keeping class sizes small is a very important element of that, and hopefully in the future for our adolescents, I think later school start times are vitally important. And I think I've made progress on both of those issues, but that work's not done. There's still more work to be done. There are budget challenges, which I'm sure we'll be talking about this evening. And I have gained a lot of experience over the last 3 years, and there's a significant learning curve in this position. And I feel that I'll be able to hit the ground running to face some of the challenges we have ahead with the budget and also with the current public health crisis.
Thank you very much. Ms. Young?
I get asked this question a lot since it's like a historic year for a number of candidates, and almost everyone had pulled papers before I decided to. But what really pushed me to put my name out there was making sure that there's a voice for the elementary grade levels. The last 2 years, the K to 5 grades have lost their digital learning specialists, grades 1 and 2 teacher assistants, and it's just really hard to get families there to speak up for those youngest students. So there to try to give that a voice, ask hard questions about compounding the impacts that we're seeing for them, and increase the communication to young families.
Thank you very much. Mr. Benoit?
So a year ago, I stepped off the committee after 14 years of spending a lot of time trying to build the district into a district that was second to none. I stepped aside because of family health issues. I was sad to step aside, but as Paul pointed out, the transparency issues that have plagued the committee since I've left were a direct catalyst in dragging me back in. I believe that a lot of the negative press that has happened and the sentiment from the public could have been avoided by having more transparency with the public. Those are things that the committees that I've been on were very good at. And I'd like to see us return to those days where collaboration and transparency were part of the actual process.
Thank you very much. The next question will go to Mr. Kravitz first, and the next series of questions are about the superintendent. So a superintendent search will begin this fall. What qualities and experience would you be looking for in a candidate? So Mr. Kravitz, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. In particular, we need to find somebody who can work well with the schools, work well with the school committee, work well with the town, and in particular also focus on the children the way that Superintendent Olson has been doing for years. As Arthur mentioned, over the past 14 years, we've actually been able to establish quite an astonishing school district. And I want to find someone who will look to carry that torch and look to carry on the success of the schools.
Thank you. Ms. Miller?
In terms of the qualities I'd be looking for in a new superintendent, it's hard to say because I feel like I don't have a predetermination of what a new superintendent would be. Bill Olson has been our superintendent for a long time, and he's going to be a hard act to follow. So I guess I'll focus on process. I think it's going to be really important for us to have a community discussion about what we're looking for in a superintendent. I think we need to consult all stakeholders, parents, teachers, students, administrators, other partners in town. And I think that we'll have some excellent candidates come forth. We're a wonderful school system. And I think the first question I would ask those candidates, be they internal or external candidates, what is your vision for the future of Westford Public Schools? How do you maintain high standards while also dealing with some of our fiscal realities? And I'd want to see what those candidates have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Young.
I think Bill Olson has done a fabulous job of keeping the focus on the students. And obviously our rankings have spoken for themselves. So I'd like to look for someone to continue that. But I'm also really interested to see what kind of innovative and creative solutions someone might have as a track record to solve some of the challenges that we're facing. And I'm interested in seeing their plans for communication and collaboration and transparency. I think those are all really important for healing the community and moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Benoit.
So I think I'm the only one on the committee or on the panel tonight that has had any experience with choosing a superintendent in the past. What I can tell you is that it's not within my purview or my experience to know what a good superintendent is. Whatever we do and however we go through this process, having Bill on board as a member of that selection committee becomes critical to me. I believe that Bill has the knowledge to tell us attributes each candidate has that make them a good candidate. I believe that Bill is a good candidate. He's always been a good candidate. I'm not really sure what's gone on in the past year that has turned the school committee off on Bill. I think it's something that he needs to be involved in.
Thank you. Ms. Chaffee?
As far as a superintendent, what I would be hoping for is somebody that could identify and put into words so the town could get behind them in a strategic plan for our children. Ultimately, Bill's process of doing what he can with the least amount of money has been great, and it's worked out well for us. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to continue based on what's going on in the climate and the environment. I think a caring superintendent and somebody that can have a vision and can communicate that vision to a school committee that could get behind them is very important for them, is very important. Social, emotional well-being is very important also. So not only academically, but also that someone that gets what it's like to be a kid these days, because it's very hard as an adult to understand what that is, and to get behind their students. We've had that quality in Mr. Olson for as long as I can remember, and that's a quality I'd like to keep.
Thank you very much. The next question will go to Ms. Miller first, and it's about, I think you touched on this earlier, but maybe you can add some specifics. How will you ensure that all members of the community, both those with and without students in the schools, are kept informed and have the opportunity to become involved in the selection of a new superintendent?
Well, yes, I have touched on process, and I think a number of other candidates here today have obviously raised some of the difficulties this year, and let me address that as well. I think before we can embark on a search for a new superintendent, we need to put the past in the past. And yes, there were some disagreements between the superintendent and the school committee at times this year. And unfortunately, that really erupted into a rather unseemly public controversy. I wish that hadn't occurred. I wish that any discord between the superintendent and the school committee had remained private, as it should have been. Ultimately, it's been resolved, and we have the right result. The superintendent will be with us for another year. I'm happy to work with him, And of course, learning from his experience, learning from past superintendent searches, and involving all stakeholders, as I commented on before, we will be embarking on a new process. But to embark on the new process, we have to put the past in the past and look to the future.
Thank you, Ms. Young.
I think we saw this year how committed, how easily the community can get behind one person and how strongly emotions can get involved. So I would absolutely encourage all types of participation with the community, whether that's open forums or focus groups, surveys. I think, like I've said, I think communication and transparency are the only way forward. And obviously I've never been a part of a superintendent search process, but I think having Bill help us through it will also be really valuable.
Thank you very much. Mr. Benoit?
So I think it starts with the nightly meetings. I think that you have to avoid at all cost doing things in executive session, first of all. I think that lends itself to people jumping to the conclusion in it, a lot of cases, that something's going on. So doing things like having the open forums, having forums where you go to each school district or each school and have a night of, open to the public to come in and talk about it, are things that open the communication. I think those are all things that we've done in the past and we should continue to do. And instead of shying away from it, we should double down on it when the opportunity for discord presents itself.
Thank you. Ms. Chaffee?
So Gloria, I just wanted to say thank you. I think you did a great job this year. So not that that really matters in this whole thing, but thank you. So as far as keeping the community involved, I actually reached out to Avery Adam at the beginning of this, I think September, maybe October, whenever the first budget numbers came out. And I asked her, I had started a parent action committee, which Valerie actually was on with me. And I wanted involvement from the school committee for us to get on her side or their side so they could feel like that we supported them. I think having parent involvement and as much as you can is appropriate. So I would encourage parent involvement with an action committee, with the superintendent search, just like I would with budgets and everything moving forward. The more you can get people behind you before a decision needs to be made, I think the better it is, and there's less controversy. I do understand that there were parameters in which the school committee had to work with, and unfortunately only they know that, the rest of us do not. So until we're in that situation, I think it's hard to judge.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kravitz?
So I think that we have a challenging situation in front of us, especially given the current situation of not being able to be meeting together in person. There are a lot of tools that are at our disposal that we could potentially use to be able to gain not only feedback but input into the superintendent search process from the community. I would like to engage the colleagues on that I would have on the school committee to determine what would be the best opportunity to really get community feedback, community buy-in, and also to even, just like the League of Women Voters did for this session tonight, ask the community for questions. I think that would help us drive towards what is important to the community in that search, and be able to incorporate that information, and then by way of finding the right candidate, show that we've listened to the community and been able to really enable them to help us in that search.
Thank you very much. We have one more question on the topic of the superintendent, and it'll go to Ms. Young first. Do you think the process for evaluating the superintendent's performance needs to be improved? And if so, how?
So for those of you that watched last night's meeting, this week's school committee meeting, all the days are blurring together, sorry. This week, the school committee did present the annual evaluation to Bill Olson. And so I've spent this week kind of reading that evaluation and reading about the process. I think that the rubric is tough for a reason. I think, you know, anytime you have to kind of bucket people's performance into, you know, preset categories, that can be difficult. But when I was surprised to read that the process also involves kind of a self-evaluation first, and I didn't see Bill present his own evidence for the progress that he's made. So I think that that's a really important process that to kind of present for yourself, and that should be really included on any future evaluations.
Thank you very much. Mr. Benoit?
So I've done quite a few of them. The state required set of metrics that you're using to evaluate the superintendent. They're often subjective, based on, you know, people's personal interaction with the superintendent to some degree, but in a lot of ways they're measurable for what he says he's going to accomplish and what he can. A lot of times, though, there needs to be latitude in whether or not he meets them based on things like the pandemic. You know, if he's got a set of goals that he set up for himself that he can't meet, I think we have to be, we can't just take a superintendent with 35 years of experience and slap him into quitting because we don't think that he met this year's criteria. You know, it's really that type of subjectiveness that I think past school committees have always done very well.
Thank you very much. Ms. Chaffee?
So I think evaluating your boss is always hard, or if you're your boss, evaluating a superintendent. I mean, if you're the school committee, it's hard to evaluate your superintendent. I do think there's some value in bringing an outside consultant to compile the comments and to sort of sift through and work through what it is the school committee members are trying to say. I think sitting down and writing it out is a lot of pressure. After reading them all, this year, I don't know what the difference was between this year and last year. After getting to know some of the school committee members, I still don't understand why some of the things were written. However, we did elect them. So, but moving forward, I think ideally it would be better if there was an outside person that could help us with the evaluation and do something in addition to the government rubric, a summary, so to speak.
Mr. Kravitz? Thank you very much, Mr. Kravitz.
In my professional experience, I perform many annual reviews for people that I work with, work for, and who work for me. And one thing that I always hold true to, and that I always hold as very important throughout the course of the year, is to ensure that the endpoint of an evaluation is not a destination, but rather it's very fluid. And as Mr. Benoit said, there were many things that happened over the course of this year that changed what would be expected of the superintendent of the school district as a whole. And what's important is, and that I've always held important, is that people understand where they stand on that journey, so that when you come to the end of the year and you receive that evaluation, it's not a surprise.
Thank you very much. Ms. Miller?
So the process of evaluating the superintendent is a responsibility of being a member of school committee. It's always not easy evaluating someone that you know and work with and respect. And I do have a deep respect for Bill and his long service to the community. And because of that, I had a discussion with Bill this morning about the evaluation process and about the meeting on Monday night. And we had a really healthy conversation. I feel like I have a strong working relationship with Bill. We co-led the teacher contract negotiations together, and we had a good conversation this morning. And what we agreed is that the most important thing at this point is to have a forward-looking focus on improved processes, in improved communication, and improved budget process. And we're starting that conversation about how we make next year a good year.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to move on to a different topic. The next two questions have more to do with how the pandemic has impacted the school system. So the first question will go to Ms. Young. Remote learning plans and implementation have become a top priority of all school districts in recent months and will possibly continue into the fall. What do you think we have learned, and what needs to be evaluated or improved for future success with remote learning? And Ms. Young, that's to you.
I think I just answered the last one, but I'll still go if that's.
Oh, were you first on the last one?
That's okay.
Oh, yes, you were. I apologize.
That's okay. So, I mean, I think this has been really difficult for everyone. You know, we send our children to public schools because we're not homeschoolers. And I think one thing that everyone could agree on is that not every child succeeds in the same environment. So I think a lot of flexibility and open dialogue between the teachers and the families are really important to create a team that focuses on how to help that student thrive. And I think that what the future, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead to what the future looks like, but I think our current process has been successful based on how quickly we had to execute it. And I think that parents and families and teachers have done a great job.
Thank you, Mr. Benoit.
So I would get at this point that we learned that the effort is huge, and that everything that we've learned so far is really just scratching the surface of what we need to know. Every child will learn differently in the classroom, and I assume all of the same things are true about learning in a virtual setting. I think if we don't get it right, then we potentially affect, a whole lot of kids' education for the next X number of years. I'm not sure that the guidance is solid yet. So I think that we probably learned that we need more guidance from the state, from the Department of Ed. There's probably much more that we need to do for networking and things like that within our infrastructure.
Thank you very much. Ms. Chaffee?
I have no idea, honestly. I'm not a teacher. I don't homeschool. I've never had to teach my children. I can't even remember to when I was in high school. What I do know is my children have gotten some value and appreciation for their teachers and what they've learned in school, how their school days are run. They would choose to be in school 100% of the time versus what they're going through now. I do think that we need to, from an outside perspective, we need to increase the amount of schoolwork given. Although some weeks I could say I'm very thankful that they weren't overloaded with schoolwork. So I think it's a give and take. I've been very happy with it so far, and moving forward, even if the kids had 25% in the school, I think it's great. I would value that over what we're having now. I do understand the position that we're in, but I just don't know. I have no way to know what the future looks like or how to fix it. I wish I did.
Thank you, Mr. Kravitz.
As a parent of two young children in the school district, one in kindergarten and one in fourth grade, we've had our challenges with educating at a distance. I'm lucky that I'm actually married to an educator. That has helped. However, because we both have our own work duties as well, that has been a challenge that we've had to address with flexibility and address with perseverance and tenacity. What I would say is that the biggest challenge, I think, at this point in time is assessing the progress of our children and ensuring the equity of access to education and learning opportunities for all of the children in the district. And I think that moving forward, we need to, that's one of the largest things or most important things that we need to address and ensure is the equity of access for those students so that when they do return, they are on a fair and equal playing field with their peers.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
So, I mean, first off, I have to thank all of our teachers and all of our students for really rising to the challenge of remote learning this spring. I mean, this was sudden and unexpected, and we had no time to prepare, and everyone really has done their best, and it's been a big lift. I think we've also learned a lot, and now we do have more time to prepare for the fall. We're anxiously awaiting guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Once we have that guidance, then a better plan can be put into place. There is a reopening committee that is looking at all of those issues. I think an important component is going to be figuring out how we can have synchronous live class time meetings so that our teachers and students can really maintain that connection with each other. I think we also need to focus on students who have IEPs and make sure that we are truly serving all of our students and that educational access is inclusive for all.
Thank you very much. The next question has to do with the financial impact of the pandemic, and it'll go to you, Mr. Benoit, first. Westford could be facing serious financial challenges due to the pandemic. Do you think schools should reduce their costs when many taxpayers in town will be facing their own personal financial challenges? And maybe somewhere in your comments, someone wanted to know about outsourcing. Would you be open to outsourcing of maintenance, food service, or other services? So
I think in the past we've looked at those specifically outsourcing, and we didn't really find that it met the criteria to provide the service that is required within the school district. As far as, can we cut costs? If you look at it, we're, of the 351 school districts in Massachusetts, we're already near the bottom. There's not a whole lot left to cut. The truth is that unless we want to start going into programs and cutting programs, then really the options for spending cuts are fairly limited. It's something that we as a community need to come together and decide, do we want to stay at the top, or do we want to slide, during this tough time into a lower rank within the state?
thank you, Ms. Chaffee.
So I think cutting or outsource, depending on what it is, outsourcing, and as long as it was the same, if it was, of course, it was more cost effective, but the same caliber of what we're used to in Westford, absolutely, that would make sense. However, I also think that your children and your education are your future. And if you really start to go to bare bones on everything, I think the end result is going to affect all of every single one of us. It's going to affect the colleges they go to. It's going to affect their lot in life. And do I think that's fair? No, I don't think that's fair. I also don't think it's fair to have senior citizens pay for schools either, but I don't know what the answer is. I think it's been challenging for everybody, and we will need creative solutions moving forward. and working in a friendly environment and being open-minded and listening, I think is going to help us all achieve better results.
Thank you, Mr. Kravitz.
So I think that obviously there will be a heavy burden and financial impact on the school system in the coming year and years potentially. And I think that will need to be met with a lot of creativity by the school committee, by the school department. I would actually look to the school department, to the administrators for direction on what services could be limited for the coming year. But I would not say that we would need to or be willing to cut any of the school programming or any of the services that are required to keep the schools running. I think that when we do return, if we were to make those types of cuts, it would actually be at the detriment of the future of our schools, and therefore at the detriment of our children and their education and the quality of their education.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
So we are facing significant challenges. It was recently discussed at the Board of Selectmen that we could already be facing a deficit of $1 million from the loss of local revenue from restaurant meal taxes and lodging taxes. And there have also been additional expenses, certainly with PPE and other necessary supplies for our public safety personnel. So any path through this budget challenge due to the coronavirus has to be collaborative with our town partners and has to be creative. And we're also going to have to be nimble. I think that outsourcing, while an interesting idea, does give me some concerns in terms of safety. Our custodians are our custodians. We have a relationship with them. Our food service personnel are our food service personnel. And that brings a certain relationship and a certain safety for our children. But yes, collaboration and creativity are definitely going to be needed.
Thank you, Ms. Young.
Yeah, I've heard the select board talk about the projected deficit, and since the school budget is half of the town budget, we can't expect that the town absorb all of that, or if there's reduced state aid, we're going to have to work with the other town departments to solve that problem. And having the open dialogue and respect with the select board and the finance committee to work together on those problems is really important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question will be related to finances, but not quite to the pandemic, and it'll go to Ms. Chaffee first. Later school start times and full-day kindergarten have faced and continue to face financial roadblocks. What would your approach be to prioritizing these district-wide initiatives and addressing the financial challenges they present? So full-day K and later school start times.
Well, so full-day kindergarten, I mean, what's good for one family is not good for another family. I like the platform that they have now where the families have to pay for a portion of full-day kindergarten. Full-day kindergarten would not have worked for my two, and my younger two, and if they had insisted on it, I don't know what I would have done. I mean, my older two. My third, it would have worked for. I like the flexibility of having to be able to pay for it, and if there's a spot, they can go. And if they can't pay for it, then there's vouchers available for that. So from that aspect, I believe that is huge, because I really wouldn't have liked it. And besides kindergarten, what was the other one?
Full-day kindergarten and later school start times.
Oh, later schools. Yes, I actually would be all for paying the extra money for later start times, the extra busing, increasing the busing fee on families for a later start time. I really thought that initiative was well thought out, and ideally it would help all the kids.
Thank you. Mr. Kravitz?
So full-day kindergarten has actually been shown to have quite a few positive impacts on student and long-term learning. For those who are more supported at home, it's not necessarily something that is going to show its value in spades, but for those who don't have as much support at home, it helps to level that playing field and give equality to education for them, helps them to do some catch up. So I would actually be for it, although funding it at this time would be obviously a challenge. The same goes for late start. Funding that right now would be a challenge, although for a long-term solution and the social and emotional well-being of our children, I think that it is something that we should look into in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
So at the end of the day, budgets are a statement of our values. And if we find these things to be priorities in our community, we'll find a way to make them work within our budgetary limitations. With full day K, this year, the original budget proposed by the superintendent was going to reduce our elementary school staff by 6 teachers. That was very concerning to me and other members of the committee. And we were able to amend that so that there was only a reduction of 4. Because we preserved those 2 positions, then when we had an influx of requests for full day K, we were able to add a full day K teacher at Robinson and at Nabnasset to fulfill a lot of that demand. It wasn't all of it, but it was a huge progress. Later school start times, wow, anyone who's done remote learning with a teenager has probably implemented later school start times in their own home. So although the coronavirus pandemic may delay our ability to achieve these goals, at the end of the day, I'm an optimist, and I think we will be able to reach those goals eventually.
Thank you, Ms. Young.
I think these are 2 programs that continue to get airtime and see increased demand for. I think it's frustrating to hear kind of an exciting program and always have it be dismissed because it's not budget neutral. So creatively looking at how to fund it or what our values dictate to redistribute money to make these things happen might be worth looking at. The demand for full day kindergarten has gone up. I think from 30 additional children wanted it just this year, and updating the study from 5 years ago would be a good start. And maybe the compromise is having full day kindergarten for all who want it while preserving the half day program for the families that works for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benoit.
So I was chair of the committee when we brought full day kindergarten into Westford. The intent of the committee at the time was to make it a shared funding model with parents. Knowing that we could only do a certain number of seats, we went into a pilot program that went on to add classes. I think fully it was intended that long-term, that adding classes over time in a thoughtful way would allow us to continue growing the program. But I think because of budgets, it would be wise for us to not grow it in a year like this. As far as the later start times, if it has a direct impact of dollars in the classroom, it again, in a time like this, it probably would make more sense to hold off for a year or 2 until the economy stabilizes and allows us to move in that direction again.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one more question before our closing statements. And Mr. Kravitz, we'll begin with you. What inequities, either unfair practices, programs, or situations, do you feel need to be improved in the schools? And what new initiatives would you seek to implement them or correct those inequities?
There are inequities that are seen and visible. There are inequities that are unseen and invisible to all of us. It's actually something that's very close to me and my family. First, there's equity and access to things such as computers or full-day kindergarten that we take advantage or take for granted that we can pay for. There's equities of having things like religious holidays honored and celebrated, and so I think that those are things that need to be addressed through I think more training provided both to the staff of our schools and to the children of our schools, and it shouldn't be something that people are told to shy away from addressing in the classroom when a question or an issue comes up.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
I think that the school committee and the superintendent have focused a lot this year on social emotional learning. If a student isn't coming, you can have the world's best teacher and the world's best curriculum, but if that student isn't able to access that curriculum and isn't able to connect with that teacher, then it's all for naught. So I am very concerned about mental health and wellness at our schools. I think at the K to 5 level, we have a need for more adjustment counselors. We're hoping, despite budgetary constraints, to add two of our elementary schools this fall. I've already mentioned later school start times. I think we also need to maintain an ongoing dialogue with our students, not just about mental health, but also about race. Race is being discussed widely in our town, in our state, in our nation this year. We need to listen to voices of color. We need to amplify those voices, and we need to, I think a lot of good things have happened in our schools in terms of professional development, but we can and always and should do more.
Thank you, Ms. Young.
I think any of our fee-based programs create inequity just by their existence. One thing that came up in a kindergarten discussion was like a sliding scale, but that's really hard for families who are just entering the school system because they're not kind of in the paperwork yet for the reduced lunch program and all that. So I think having that open communication and advertised for programs like that would be really helpful. You know, I saw several times noted in the superintendent's evaluation this year that the diversity and inclusion team hadn't met much this year. I think now more than ever is the time to lean into that and draw upon that wealth of information to direct our school system to address this.
Thank you, Mr. Benoit.
So I think inequities, by the nature of what they are, tend to be very tough to recognize until you've solved another inequity. A lot of times you don't realize that you have a deeper rooted problem until you start working on the professional development, for example. And then people start to absorb it and realize that there's these other things that are causing this that you have to address as well. So I think it's really kind of a step-by-step task. And I've always believed that the Westford schools did an excellent job of recognizing inequities and taking action against them. The hard part is really recognizing it and recognizing that it is affecting some or multiple people.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chaffee.
So I grew up in a very poor family, in and out of foster care through most of my childhood. So I get inequity. I've faced it firsthand. Luckily, as a child, I had no idea what I was faced with. Had the last 3 months been my life as a child, it would have been awful. Every day would have been a challenge for me. So my heart you know, you hope that you know those kids that need help, but you don't. And ultimately, I think our teachers and our administrators do a great job. I think our children and our students need to be schooled more on compassion. And ultimately, that is the target, because if it starts at the bottom, it often starts at the top. But I think the teachers do a great job. And so, like I said, the administrators, but peers do not. Peers do not get it, especially in this town. They have no idea what their friends are living with or not, or how to help them, or even how to ask. So, and oftentimes what kids don't understand, they make fun of other children. And I think with inequities in this town, we could all do a better job of helping our kids be better humans when it comes to that.
Thank you very much. So
Sure.
we will now end with our closing statements, and I will begin by reading Terry Ryan's statement, and then you will each have 2 minutes, beginning with Ms. Young for your closing statements. So Mr. Ryan writes, "Good evening. I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for allowing me this statement. I cannot join you tonight because my oldest child is graduating from Westford Academy, and tonight is a scheduled event. Those who have had a senior understand how important events like this are and what a busy time of year this is. Events this year are different, yet no less important to my son and all the other seniors. This is also an important time for our school system. COVID-19, budget, and leadership decisions are subjects to be addressed by the new school committee. It will be a time of change, changes in how we educate our children, changes in how we budget for this new normal, and changes in leadership. At a time of so much change, I bring experience, stability, and perspective. I will bring an experience to this committee, having served for 6 years from 2012 to 2018 as secretary, vice chair, and chair. I have served on the policy subcommittee and as a member of the teacher contract negotiating team for 2 contracts. I have supported programs like Project Bread Learning, Chromebooks for Westford Academy freshmen, transgender policies, full-day kindergarten, and the installation of security cameras in our schools. I have worked with the superintendent for those 6 years, including 1 as the school committee chair. I do support Bill Olson and will continue to support his leadership, and having him as superintendent during this time is a benefit to the district. I look forward to once again advocating for education in Westford, promoting excellence and innovation, and building a cohesive and collaborative environment. There is a lot of work to be done as we move forward, as we move toward the fall and the opening of school. It will take collaboration, understanding, and everyone pulling in the same direction. I will respond to questions asked tonight on my Facebook page, Terry Ryan for Westford School Committee 2020. And in closing, I would ask that you vote for Terry Ryan for School Committee. Thank you, Terry. So now we begin with closing statements. Ms. Young, you have 2 minutes.
I just wanted to thank the League of Women Voters again. I know this is new and uncomfortable to try and trust technology for something so important as this, but I think it was really important. I think that one thing that really energizes me about being on the school committee is the idea of, well, why not? And not just looking at what has been done in the past. There's a lot of challenges ahead, and I think that communication and transparency are the most important things we can focus on moving forward. There's a big appetite for a lot of communication. I can see that after every school committee meeting, when I post a summary on my Facebook page, it is met with resounding thanks that for people who can't make the meetings but want to stay engaged. I have a lot of other ideas, like having office hours with committee members to try and help make sure that more voices are heard and felt validated when they approach us being the school committee, sorry. And I think that that's really important to move forward and to heal the community based on the year that we've had. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Miller?
Thank you to the League of Women Voters again for hosting this unconventional event during an unconventional time. Our schools in town are facing new challenges with the COVID-19 crisis, and to ensure student safety and success, if I'm reelected to school committee, my focus will be on reopening schools in a way that balances safety while maximizing learning and connection. I feel that next year we need an improved budget process. The Board of Selectmen every year provides a budget directive to the town manager, and I think school committee should follow that example and should provide a budget directive to the superintendent. I think we also need a finance subcommittee. We've always had a policy subcommittee. We need a finance subcommittee to help during those early stages of budget formulation. Again, on the town side, there was an event a few years ago called Show Me the Money that talked about the town budget. I think we need a Show Me the Money school budget edition to help educate the public about the school budget process. I also believe in maintaining strong working relationships with the superintendent, our school administrators, and other town boards, and of course our amazing teachers and staff. I think I have those strong relationships. I've been able to work successfully with the superintendent on Unit A negotiations and other matters. I've been able to work successfully with other town boards. During our budget crisis this year, I approached our town partners and we were able to get the unanimous support of the select board and finance committee for a $400,000 appropriation in support of special education funding, pending approval at fall town meeting. I see my time is up, so I will say thank you to all. If you want to learn more about me, you can visit my website at electgloriamiller.com or my Facebook page. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kravitz. We can't hear you, Mr. Kravitz.
Oh.
There you go.
All right. I would like to first thank all of the candidates on the call with me tonight. It has been enlightening and helpful to understand your point of view and where we're all coming from. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this opportunity for our community to get to know the candidates for this year's election. Thank you all for your thoughtful questions. We're in a time of change. I look forward to working with all the members of the school committee, with the school administration, and with the parents of our community as we move through these difficult times. Together, we can improve transparency. We can increase community involvement in the decisions we make as a committee. We can restore the trust that is eroded. Together, we can address the challenges we are sure to face with the budget in the coming years. We can navigate the landscape of inequities that exist and that will evolve in the coming months and years as a result of the events in our world today. With my help, we can ensure our next superintendent is the right fit for our community. Remember, a vote for Paul Kravitz is a vote for the success of our schools. A vote for Paul Kravitz is a vote for our children's futures. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chaffee.
Sorry. So thank you everybody for participating tonight, and thank you for all the other candidates. Good luck in the next few weeks. So what's best for one student is not the best for another student. And what I've valued about Westford is that's always taken into consideration when it's for teacher choosing or what path your child is going to have moving forward. My son just recently phased out of his IEP, and I was extremely nervous. But given that, especially considering he'd been on an IEP since he was in first grade and now in 10th grade, but the great thing about Westford is they always have, with my experience has been, they educate the parent and they make the parent feel just as secure as the student. So my place on the school committee is from a place of being a parent of a student that had once been on an IEP, an elite athlete who has just had to find her own way in the high school, and for the first time in her life was involved in a team sport, and for the first time in her life had a community that she enjoyed being a part of. I feel like there's not great representative on the board right now for any athletics in Westford. It's not a knock on the board. It's just, that's a difference of opinion that I would provide. Being part of a team leader is always, being a team person is always a great value. I will never pretend to know something I don't know or hope not to. And I hope to learn a lot over the next 30 days. And if I get elected, I will be sure that I will listen and hear, and my opinions will be based on facts, not on my own personal gain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benoit.
So I'd like to thank the voters for their continued support for our schools. Thank the parents, students, staff, administrators for really stepping up in a year when it's been a very challenging environment for everyone. I believe that our staff has really, gone above and beyond like they always do. Our students have really stepped forward. I think it's time for our school committee to reinvest time and effort into relationship building within the community, to foster trust with families, our students, and the many faces of town government. We need to return the schools to a fiscal stability model that works for us. The budget should be a work in progress up until town meeting approves it, and the school committee shouldn't forget this. We're here to support the children of Westford and the children of Westford's families. That's what we're elected for. What goes beyond that is to use our best judgment and do the things that we can do on a day-to-day basis. But also, I heard somebody say earlier on to listen. Listen to the administration, listen to the staff, listen to students, listen to their families. All of those things make Westford and keep Westford at the top of our game. And truthfully, with many years of experience, I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and go back to work and do the best that I can to return us to that. I ask for your vote and thank the League of Women Voters for hosting the candidate night.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all the candidates for school committee. And now if you, the school committee candidates, could please turn off your video and mute your microphones, or you may leave the meeting depending on what you would like to do. And if the select board candidates could please turn on your cameras. Okay, there we go. I think we have everyone now. Okay, so during our final panel, welcome, you will be hearing from the candidates for the select board. And just as in the prior panels, they will each give 2-minute opening statements, 2-minute closing statements, and then we'll have 1 minute to answer each question. We will begin in a minute with 2-minute opening statements, beginning with Mr. Clay. And this year's candidates for the 2 3-year seats on the select board include Anita Tanakarn-Wynn and Andrew M. Spanos and incumbent Tom Clay. And can you all see the timer, Joanna Myers? You can give me a head nod or, okay, wonderful. All right, so we'll begin with you, Mr. Clay. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you very much. Hello, Westford. My name is Tom Clay, and I'm asking for your vote to re-elect me to a 2nd term on your select board. My wife, Sarah, and our 3 daughters and I have been proud Westford residents for the past 18 years. First, I'd like to thank our hosts for making adjustments in timing of this event. I think it's good for democracy that we move this earlier so people have more time in this mail-in ballot era. It has been my pleasure to serve the people of Westford. First as a soldier, I was an Army Ranger leading recon units, more recently on the school committee and select board. Right now, your town government is focused on COVID-19 and keeping our residents safe and well. Thanks to all of our first responders, health professionals, school and town staff have been working incredibly hard for us in demanding and sometimes dangerous conditions so we can stay safe. 3 years ago, you elected me to the select board. For my first initiative, Scott Hazelton and I co-chaired a detailed benchmark survey and needs assessment of our first responders. resulting in additional first responders and resources that have refocused first responders on proactively working with our community. Westford is now recognized as one of the safest towns in the Commonwealth. In the wake of the Parkland tragedy, Scott and I again took leadership of a broad and diverse working group focusing on safety and wellness in Westford. Over the past 2 years, we've made substantial improvements in emergency communication and response capability and facility security townwide. But even before the current COVID pandemic, the greatest risks to the people of Westford are self-harm, suicide, domestic abuse, and addiction, problems only magnified during this crisis and conditions experienced by all of us, students, adults, and seniors alike. The Town and School Safety Task Force is now focused on getting the right mix of community resources in place to keep all of Westford safe and well. All of this is happening in a challenging fiscal environment. I have extensive experience with our schools in town in facing budget challenges and finding solutions. Experience matters, especially in these difficult times. We've accomplished a lot together over the past 3 years, but there's much left for us to do on safety, wellness, preserving our great schools, making our community more inclusive, and a host of other important issues. You can find out more about me and my ideas at tomclayforwestford.com. Thank you, Westford. Be well and stay safe.
Thank you, Mr. Spanos.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Spanos, and I am a candidate here for the Westford Select Board. First and foremost, I'd love to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this on, given the environment that everything is in right now. If I'm correct in saying, I believe this is the 51st straight candidates night without missing a beat, even during the pandemic, which is fantastic. So thank you to them. A little bit about myself. I grew up, born and raised here in town. I grew up in Nabnasset, Elm Road, actually. Graduated from Westford Academy, class of 2004. Oddly enough, graduated same year with my wife, class of 2004. We live here in town now in the Parker Village area with our 2 daughters, 5 and almost 5 and 1.5. I still have family in town. My father, as many of you may know, and grandparents own Floral Arts, the big yellow building there on Route 110. A little bit about my professional life. I'm a managing partner in a commercial paper broker house in Woburn, Massachusetts. We basically take non-stakeholding capital injections and invest them into small and medium-sized businesses nationwide. When banks are not willing to lend the capital, we're reaching out to private equity firms to try to facilitate them and introduce them into debt financing rather than equity financing, and piece that together with the small and medium-sized businesses that are the backbone of the economy here in this country. So I own and operate 2 other small PE sides that inject capital when others or our institutional funds do say no. Ultimately, what I'm really looking to do is, and hoping to get across, is that I'm always looking for a way to get things done. I'm always looking to say yes when, if there is a way to do it. And as a 3rd-generation Westford resident, and hopefully my kids will be 4th, I want you to be comfortable and know that all decisions that I'd be a part of and be making would be ones that would be in the long-term and best interest for the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Tana Carnwin?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So first, I'd like to say thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event and to WestfordCAT for helping to record and circulate this video. My name is Anita Tana Carnwin, and I'm running for Select Board in Westford. I live in Nabnasset with my husband, my 6-year-old son, and 2-year-old daughter. I've been on the Westford Cultural Council since 2016 and have served as the chair for the past 2 years. I also serve on the Commission on Disability, and I'm on the Board of Directors for Freedom's Way National Heritage Area. I'm also a former steering committee member for the League of Women Voters. I'm running because I'm passionate about the power of people and the power of partnerships. And I'm passionate about these topics because as a health policy consultant, I advocate for seniors, people with disabilities, and family caregivers for easier access to services by streamlining how state agencies can partner together to minimize redundancy and leverage resources. I'm currently working on a federal COVID-19 initiative to ensure that seniors and people with disabilities have access to needed services and to prevent depression due to social isolation. And from doing policy work over the last 13 years, I've learned that the key to building partnerships is strong, transparent communication. Someone with experience in collaboration and strengthening community is what the town needs right now and what I will bring to the Select Board. The town is projecting a $3.9 million cut in state aid. This is on top of an $800,000 to $900,000 projected loss of town revenue because of COVID-19. We'll need to come together to get through this together. As a member of the Select Board, I'll be a voice for families of young children, a voice for the Asian community, and an advocate for older adults, people with disabilities, and their family members. And most importantly, I will listen to, represent, and serve all residents of Westford.
Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to questions, and you'll each have a minute. We'll start. The first question will go to Mr. Spanos first. So on the topic of finances, our first questions will be about the finances of the town. Given that the upcoming year will have significant financial challenges, it's likely that town departments will be unable to provide the current level of service using the current revenue streams. How would you balance keeping town services with minimizing the tax burden on households and individual citizens?
Yeah, so first and foremost, something is obviously going to have to be looked at and changed with what we have going on. We'll have to look at capital spending and what we have going across the board. And there's a big difference between needs and wants that we're going to have to establish. And that's going to be a collaboration where we work together and really determine what's going to be necessary to move forward with this. As Anita already mentioned, we are looking at $1 million deficit here with regard to free cash there, and $3.9 million in state and local aid, which has been stagnant for some time for our town. So we have a lot of decisions here to make that are going to be on that. It's going to have to be on a collaborative effort between all the different boards and committees to figure out where we can really piece everything together and make it whole and make it work. And, you know, before we ever were to look at raising taxes on our taxpayers, I would want to make sure that we exhausted all opportunities and options before that would be even something that we would consider.
Thank you. Ms. Tana Carnwin.
Yeah, and just to add to what Andrew was saying, in addition to all of the collaboration and coordination that we would need to do and really be transparent about the process and looking at all of the budgets across the town departments, I'm really a fan of kind of looking to grant funding. And I know that a lot of opportunities are coming out of the CARES Act. I learned about a $4,000 small business grant that is funded through the CARES Act that the town of Acton is implementing. Maybe that's something that we could explore. And I know that just from my experience of reviewing grant applications and putting together grant applications that it really comes down to partnerships and getting as many people together. It's hard for a funder to reject an application when you have multiple organizations partnering together. And my kind of underlying theme of partnerships, I feel like can result in tangible benefits for the town.
Thank you, Mr. Clay.
So to begin with, we've already asked the town, all the different town agencies to take steps to reduce or delay near-term spending. As you will see at town meeting, we've pushed out a bunch of capital appropriations to help preserve cash until we understand what the environment's going to look like. We've asked for different departments to put together scenarios to help us be able to react to the different levels of state aid that become available. I don't think we know yet what kind of federal relief we'll see within the state aid package. So we need to be ready for all those different scenarios, and we need to make each spending decision as it comes. But to echo something that both the other candidates have said, we really need to do this together. If we're talking about potentially making some major changes across the board in terms of town spending, we need to bring the community in and make sure that people have a voice, they understand the trade-offs, they feel like they had participation in those trade-offs. So I'm committed to being transparent, doing it together, and being very, very careful along the way and until we understand what the future looks like.
Thank you. Also on the subject of finances, and this will go to Ms. Tana Carnwin first, would you support using the money in the reserve fund and free cash to make up for any lost revenues due to the pandemic? Why or why not?
You know, I think that after we explore all of our other options, I think if we need to dip into the cash reserves, that is something that we might have to do this year because of COVID. I think the amount of our budget loss and projected revenue loss is just like we've never experienced something like this before, like a pandemic. So yes, I think we might have to explore that.
Thank you, Mr. Clay.
Yeah, it'll almost be, certainly in my opinion, be some mix of reductions and some amount of deficit spending out of free cash. Westford has at various times in the past had a budget deficit and operated that way. We don't like to do it. It's not good practice, but in this situation, I think it's the only reasonable thing for us to do. Also, I think we just need to be nimble because we haven't ever seen a downturn like this before. We don't know what the recovery is going to look like and what the pace of recovery will be. So I think that it's very, very likely after a careful set of evaluations, we will decide that we need to be operating at least partially in deficit this year.
Thank you, Mr. Spanos.
Yeah, I agree with the other two candidates here on this. It's almost going to be impossible to not touch the free cash. I think we have to be very careful with how we do approach dipping into that. I believe the number is 500,000. If we drop below 500, we're potentially, could affect our bond rating. But with that being said, even if we were to be depleting the free cash after reallocating or allocating the $400,000 to the special education program for the school, we're not going to have enough that's in there to cover it. So we're going to have to be liquid, and we're going to also have to make sure that we can prepare and make sure that we're well positioned for the future and not just kind of run the well dry here, just to make sure that there's still something in the stable for future need in case it comes up.
Thank you very much. Staying on the finances topic, what criteria would you use to decide whether to support an override to fund the increasing needs of town departments? And that goes to Mr. Clay first, I'm sure. Sorry.
Well, I was a big part of the last override we did. And what I'll say is we really have to make sure that we are able to think carefully about what our targets are and what we really need. We have to build a community consensus around what those needs are and have people modify the plan and get to a plan people can really buy into. And it does take some time. There's a multi-year aspect to doing any kind of override campaign. It's a lot of communication, a lot of community involvement. That being said, I do think that there are really important needs that we need to think carefully about meeting. Right now, as part of the Town and School Safety Task Force, we've been reviewing data. And if you look at the suicide attempt rates, even as young as in 6th grade, I think there were 68 reported suicide attempts at Westford Academy in 2018. We have a lot of issues with regard to depression in our senior population. So I'm passionate about making sure that we're providing the right set of services to keep us really safe. And it could be, after careful consideration and community discussion, that we need to consider that. And if we want to have the town really reflect the values that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Spanos.
Yeah, there are certain services that if they were ever in jeopardy, we would absolutely have to make sure that we made every effort possible not to cut those. And, with regard to an override, if it comes to being a necessity, it's a necessity. However, with that being said, we have to be very careful about how we approach an override. And as Tom mentioned, there's multiple other health issues here in town, mental health issues, public safety issues that all have to be taken into account. And there are things that, you, for whatever it may be, you can't just ignore and you can't walk away from. And we have to also be careful in the same breath of some of our other pockets of town that are very impacted by some of these overrides, that we're not looking to run anybody out of town. And Westford still at heart is a very blue collar town in the 55th percentile for income. So, we have to be careful if we keep putting these overrides forth and moving them for just who we're pushing out of town here. And that's something to be considered of.
Thank you, Ms. Tanakarn-Wynn.
Yeah, I really believe in getting everyone together and taking a close review of everyone's budgets. And, going to override, I feel like is a long process that needs a lot of communication, as Tom mentioned, and just a lot of review. I was thinking about the senior population in town. They're a quarter of our population. And when I was talking with the director of the Cameron Senior Center, she was talking about how there's a gap between what's affordable housing and low-income housing, and those people who might assume are eligible for affordable housing, they're actually not because of the income that they have. And I definitely would want to take that into account and just do a really close review before moving forward with an override and just kind of starting on that pathway.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to a couple questions about buildings and business in town. And the first question will go to Mr. Spanos. Should the town be considering lifetime operating costs when making decisions about capital purchases and building projects? And if so, how should the town make that happen?
Absolutely. Anytime we're going to be getting into something, we need to think of lifetime operating costs, because ultimately moving forward, those are going to be fixed on the balance sheet for years to come. I think the first one when we're thinking about operating costs is the Main Street project. Not that that's really breaking the bank here, but it's something that we got into without absolutely knowing the plan and the outcome of what we wanted to ultimately do with that. And now we're debating on what we should do. And if you look at it, I believe FinCom just actually recommended the sale of the property. But no, for sure, it's something where anytime that we're thinking short term, it's short-sighted, just to put it as simple as possible. And to think long term is absolutely a necessity.
Thank you. Ms. Tana-Conwin?
Yeah, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again? Because I think I got confused over.
Sure. Should the town be considering lifetime operating costs when making decisions about capital purchases and building projects? And if so, how should the town make that happen?
Yeah, I know that what Andrew was talking about when we were thinking about sort of the long-term vision of properties that we're absorbing or that we're paying for. If we're looking at 63 Main Street or the 51 Main Street town building the municipal building that's in the works for, at least for planning, we'll see what happens with that. I think we should take a future, we need to think about how we can, like the longer term sustainability of our town, right? And also short-term, just like the short-term view of it, it just wasn't, I don't have a good answer for that that's adding to anything that Andrew mentioned. I mean, we should really think long-term. I don't know what's the benefit of the town. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Clay.
For major new capital projects like the town center building that's under discussion, there is a forecast of operating expenses that will go on over time. So if the question is, should you think about not just how much does it cost to build the building, but to heat it, support it, maintain it, clean it? That is part of the estimate that's done when people look at a major project. And it's very important that it's done. And it's very important because Prop 2.5, which is the legislation that sort of limits the spending that the towns can do in a lot of ways, that governs the operating budget. And so you might have a capital project that you can fund with capital money, which is not out of the operating budget, but all those expenses to keep it running over time come out of the operating budget, and every dollar competes with another dollar that could be used for schools, could be used for seniors, could be used for some other purpose. So yeah, very, very important to consider it. There is a model that's generated that looks at what those impacts will be and how they'll land in the budget in future years.
Thank you very much. I believe someone mentioned 63 Main Street, so I'll ask this question next, and it'll go to Ms. Tana-Conwin first. Do you support the selling of the house or property at 63 Main Street?
Pre-COVID, I probably would not have supported it because I did take the survey. I know that there was an exploration of whether or not the school administration building would want it, and I know that the task force was looking to see and taking another look at the survey to see if there could be other uses for it, such as a cultural building. I know that the Historical Society needs space for a lot of the artifacts and the materials for holding at the museum, or kind of holding somewhere else, just a holding place, I guess. But I think because of COVID and where we are, I would probably support the selling of it, as long as it's, we do have the parking lot in the back, which I know is on the article, one of the articles.
Thank you, Mr. Clay.
So right now, the decision that the select board has recommended is to give the committee that was tasked with looking at potential uses for that property another year, which I do support. I think it's most likely, in my opinion, that as Anita mentioned, there would be a subdivision of that property to provide a little bit of additional resource to the town in terms of parking, and that there would be some historical restrictions put on the property, and then it would be sold to a single family, new resident in Westford. I think that that's a good solution, and it really gets the goals that we were out for in the beginning accomplished. The only reason the town got into the business of buying that property in the first place was that we wanted to have control over the way it looked, wanted to make sure there was not a multifamily built in that site, and there were some good options for the town in terms of additional parking. So I think we can reach all those goals if we're careful over the next year. But I'm still open to the work of that committee. I know they've been working hard, and I want to listen to what their final recommendations are.
Thank you, Mr. Spanos.
Yeah, it seems to be an ongoing discussion there with that building, and I would love to poke the committee's brain just to figure out where that fell short or where they're looking for more time on the project. And I don't doubt that it's a difficult situation by any means. There are multiple uses that I could see for for the property. However, we have to be very careful about how we proceed and how we use that. Everybody is talking about additional parking. I'm sure that we'd all love additional parking. I believe we've felt the lack of parking there up at Town Hall. However, using that as a multifamily or a cultural building or anything like that, we have to be careful. And there has been some pushback by residents around that area about their home's property value and how it would be affected. And even though the road and bush is there, it's something to consider. Again, I believe that FinCom at this point has recommended the sale. The select board is giving that team, the committee, another year. So I'm anxious, and I'd love to be a part of that and just see where we are in a year really on this. But I think if we have that year and we put it forth, there's no problem at all with that.
Thank you very much. Continuing on the property topic, and this will go to Mr. Clay first. What should be done about the Drew Farm parcel on Boston Road?
Well, for many years, so we're talking about the gateway to Westford, the property that used to host a wonderful series of sort of farmers market type events. So right now it's in private hands. The range of options that the town has right now really are to enforce the restrictions that are put on that property. So there are special restrictions for agricultural use on that property that mean it can't be used for a lot of other development purposes. Because that property was not in town hands before, it's not in town hands now. Our role is really to make sure that that the spirit of those restrictions are still maintained. I think after a rocky start, there's been a pretty good dialogue with the current owner, and there has been, I think, a good faith discussion about keeping that property, in line with what the expectations were set around the restrictions that are there. And so I think for now, until that private citizen decides, if he ever does, he wants to do something different with that property, our role is really to make sure that the restrictions are met.
Thank you, Mr. Spanos.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to consider with that gateway property, as I like to call it there as well. The private developer out of Groton, he was looking to build a monstrosity of a 8,000 square foot farm to table restaurant, I believe. Scaled that down since then, and has brought it to town meeting a couple of different times. We have to be careful about the two different residential neighborhoods that abut that. We have Crown Road, which comes up and then comes down, and then we have Drew Crossing there from the other side. But at the same token, Westford still does control the development rights to that, and that was part of the sale when it was initially changed hands, 25 years ago or whatnot. If anything were to happen with that property, Westford needs to make sure that it gets fair market value for that land, because right now we're only being offered, I believe it's $107,000 on top of the $115 in taxes or what have you that are owed there on top of that, when we could assess, and that property is easily probably worth $2 to $3 million. And you look at what the people or the players down the street at Burton's have had to pay to get in there just on that stretch of land. There's no reason that somebody should be coming in and developing that for $650,000.
Thank you. Ms. Tana Carnwin.
It is privately owned. I'm not really sure what we can do about it right now, and I think we should wait to see what the owner comes up with next, what his next steps are.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is going to be about environmental sustainability plans, and it'll go to Mr. Spanos first. Many towns in our area have environmental sustainability plans with specific measurable goals that the town manager reports on annually. Would you support such a plan in Westford?
Absolutely. There's a few different things that we can look at, whether it's the preservation of our wetlands, or we have the stormwater enterprise fund. We also have our recycling rates to battle everything that's coming forth. I would absolutely approve that. It depends on how it's going to affect the taxpayers. And to be quite honest with you, Heather, it's a broad question. So there's a lot that goes into it. But to give you the short and sweet answer there on that, absolutely would be something that I would love to hear more about.
Thank you, Ms. Tana Carnwin.
Yeah, I agree too. I think we should take a look at it if you're looking at or trying to find other financial means or ways to increase revenue or reduce costs. If it's the trash pay-as-you-throw program, something like that. I know that that's something that the select board or the town manager's office was going to explore a little bit more to see what our options are. But yeah, I think we should take a look at it.
Thank you, Mr. Clay.
I should give a shout out to the town staff and all the work they've done already under the green initiatives that are available in grant form. So we have taken advantage of a lot of those. I know that they shop carefully for energy that has the greenest profile that they can. One of the things some towns do is they insist on going to certain kinds of renewable for town buildings. When we've looked at that before, we've said, you know, all those dollars that would go into that would compete with dollars for the schools and other important needs. So we'd really have to have a community conversation, decide that priority was extremely high for us to make that move. But yes, I think it's a good idea. I actually fielded a constituent question today about could we get a higher profile environmental and sustainability set of goals in the town manager and select board goals for next year. I think that's a great idea. So looking forward to that discussion.
Thank you. The next question is about supervision, and I'll go to Ms. Tanakarn-Wynn first. As a select board member, your role is to supervise some town employees, including the town manager. What processes should be in place to hold them accountable?
I think there are policies already in place to hold them accountable. There's a town manager list of goals every year that she sets with a select board, and I think that's what she's reviewed on. And I think she's been doing a great job, and I would continue those policies that are already in place.
Thank you, Mr. Clay.
So Anina's exactly right that there is a sort of a standard annual review accountability process, but in these crazy times that we're in, it's almost like a daily event that we're checking in and talking about, are we doing the right things? Are we being active enough? Are we being safe enough? I will say that Jody and the town staff have been phenomenal in this environment. And I think that we are healthier and better and have saved lives because of the way they've acted in the past 6 months through this crisis. So she has a tough job, and I will say that she's under enormous scrutiny all the time from the public and from the select board. So I don't think there's really an accountability issue, at least that I'm aware of in that position. I think if something is, almost everything happens in a fishbowl, everything is public, everything is commented on. And I know the select board takes their role really seriously to make sure we're doing right by the town and keeping close tabs on what Jody's doing.
Thank you, Mr. Spanos.
Yeah, as was mentioned, there are long-term goals that are in place, and those are great limited and great benchmarks for how we're doing across the board, whether it's Jody or any other position there, really, that's coming back on a project. But it would be helpful to have something more on the short term, and I think that if there's one thing that we can take out of this entire pandemic, it's that I think we're all getting very comfortable with Zoom calls, or at least these alternative modes of communication. And whether it can be as quick as a short update here and there, those go a long way, and it just works on keeping everybody in the loop. And technology has advanced a long way here now, where you can send out one message that pings multiple people there at the same time. Now, setting up those shorter term benchmarks, or that would be on an as felt or as needed basis, it does bring in a little bit of human error, so we'd have to refine that. But ultimately, the processes that are in place do seem to be working.
Thank you very much. We're going to head back to business a little bit with a question about Main Street. And I'll go to Mr. Clay first. How can we bring more businesses to Westford to help fill many of the empty storefronts in town?
So that's a great question. I've been the select board delegate to the Westford Economic Development Committee since I was elected, and we spent a lot of time thinking about what can we do to make Westford more attractive? How do we market the properties that are there? How do we partner with real estate developers and real estate agents to get the right kind of properties there? So a couple of concrete things the committee has done. They've looked at streamlining a lot of the permitting processes. Recently, as we're recovering from the COVID pandemic, the committee's taken a big interest in the work the health department is doing to make sure that when we're ready to reopen, we can reopen our restaurants quickly and safely. And I know that the health department has an excellent plan along those lines. I think we've got some creative developers in town that are bringing more service, restaurant, unique experience type venues in a lot of the storefronts that used to hold different kinds of businesses as the whole sort of business world has evolved. So I think we can make it easy for businesses. We can make what we are as a community visible, and I think we can support our partners in town, and that's what the committee's been focused on.
Thank you, Mr. Spanos.
Really having trouble with the space bar. No, as Tom mentioned, it's ease of access for these businesses, right? Whether it's a large corporation that's looking to come to town and we're going to roll out a tax incentive plan for them just to entice them because some tax revenue is better than no tax revenue, like what we did with Red Hat. Or it's a small business, and we relook at how we value businesses that are valued under $1 million here in town, right? And incentivize them or streamline the permitting in the process. But whatever we can do to build strength in numbers there is going to be very valuable. And the types of businesses that we want to incentivize to move in as well is something that we should consider given the COVID pandemic. And I think people will think twice more about having to go to a restaurant than drop off their taxes. Now, I mean, as Westford residents, we all love to go out and eat, and so does everybody else. But just considering the types of businesses that we try to incentivize and the ones that really need it to go into those locations, I think will be important.
Thank you. Ms. Tana Carnwin.
Yeah, I agree with streamlining processes and offering short-term incentives for businesses coming in, but I'm also actually really concerned about the small businesses that already exist in our town. And I know that a lot of the business community is really made up of small business here in Westford. And there are people who are struggling because of COVID and wondering whether or not they can open at all. And I know that I'm planning on speaking with someone later who is talking about how she doesn't think her business will be able to reopen. And how can we help those businesses who have already invested time and resources into our town and help them reopen?
Thank you very much. Okay, this will be our last question before we do closing statements, and it'll go to Mr. Spanos first. Name 2 things that Westford is doing really well and 2 areas where improvement is needed.
Very good. 2 things that we're doing very well. At this point in time, I'm going to use the school system for both, right? So the school system has been fantastic. It's best in state. It has been for a long time. The same breath, we need some stability there, especially with the superintendent position and how we're going to move forward from what was almost the loss of Bill Olson here quickly. As well, our police force and services fire, fantastic. I know that we haven't had to look at anybody on the dispatch side of things in quite some time, which tells me that there's efficiencies there once those 2 forces were combined. Something else that we could use some help on specifically within that would probably be the ambulance fund and how we're going to look at the 2 different types of transport that we have, whether it's life-threatening or non-life-threatening transport, and if we should shop out for some of those services here at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Tana Carnwin.
Yeah, I was trying to think through things that I think we're doing really well and what we're not doing well, and I feel like it's really hard to put things in those buckets because there are pros and cons and good things and bad things with every topic that's in life, right? So I think something that I see an opportunity for improvement around is partnering, and that's a lot of what my platform is about, because I think people kind of stick into their silos and into their corners, but people don't come out and talk to each other. And I think just even though we can't do this right now because of COVID and meeting people in person, that really makes such a difference, being able to hear from the other side and just kind of talking and understanding, because through that we can move forward and do things together. I've been able to really extend our reach, at least for the Cultural Council, and building new partnerships with organizations that I feel like are in the same realm that we just have no relationship with. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to do that in town. But something that I know that is really good is that this community comes together in a time of crisis, and that everyone chips in, regardless of where you are on that side of an argument. People come together when people need help.
Thank you. Mr. Clay?
We have an embarrassment of riches here, but I think over a long period of time, the schools have just been a tremendous resource. A lot of people moved here because of the schools. I think we're good, can do better, but are really strong. I think our first responders are incredible. I was able to join the protest on the Common yesterday, where a bunch of young people were discussing experiences with racism. All the examples they gave listed the Westford Police as an ally, people who'd come to their aid and help them. So that makes me very proud. I think we need to do better at communicating. I think the last budget cycle showed that we're not keeping everybody involved. We're not making the information as available as it could be. And if we're entering a tough set of decisions, we really need a great communication and community engagement set. I think that's something we need to improve. And then through the Town Safety and Wellness Committee, I feel like my main focus will really be looking at these threats to our safety, which are addiction, self-harm, suicide, domestic abuse. I think we need to do better there and do more there because those are the things that actually are the biggest life to our citizens. So I put a lot of focus there.
Thank you very much. So we've made it to closing statements, and we'll begin with Ms. Tanakarn-Wynn. You have up to 2 minutes.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters for putting together this event, and to WestfordCAT for recording the video. I know I'm not perfect, but I would be proud to serve as a member of the Select Board, bringing to the table my unique voice as an Asian American woman and a proven track record for building bridges both in town and through my work. So collaboration and transparency are two critical qualities that I think will be needed to lead the town through this upcoming challenging budget year, and I have those two qualities. Not only do I build partnerships, but I know how to leverage them for the good of the town. I've helped lead the town's first collaborative event between the Cultural Council, the Westford Historical Society and Museum, and the League of Women Voters on a year-long event series to celebrate the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote. I led the outreach to develop a new partnership between the Cultural Council and the Pear Center for the Arts, and now I'm organizing a community forum on racial tensions and policing policies with a group of community leaders, and the Westford Police Department. Whenever there are tough topics, I understand and recognize the need to come out of our corners and have a conversation to understand the other side. And there'll be tough conversations the upcoming year because of the budget, and I'll meet them head on. As a member of the Select Board, I will listen to, represent, and serve all residents of Westford. I'll be an advocate for older adults, people with disabilities, and family caregivers, and I'll be a voice of families of young children, with young children. And while many families first explore Westford because of our great school system, it's the town's sense of community that convinces them to settle here. We have a remarkable group of volunteers and town employees in Westford who have worked to make Westford the incredible town it is today, and I want to continue their good work. Westford, you have 2 votes for Select Board. I hope you'll consider one of those votes for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spanos.
Yeah, I'd love to thank the league again here for putting this on. I'd love to thank WestfordCAT for filming it. But also I'd like to thank my opponents and everybody else that's ran here tonight. So Tom and Anita, thank you. Ultimately, I was speaking with a few people at Town Hall, and one particular woman was letting me know that this was one of the most active years they've had in candidacy. And ultimately, that's great to hear, because as a third-generation Westford resident, and going to be here for the long run, in the long haul, the real winner at the end of this is going to be the town of Westford, and that's fantastic. And ultimately, I think that that's something that we can be all proud of. Ultimately, when you have your vote there on June 30th, or if you're mailing in before, I encourage you to look at voting for me, Andrew Spanos. I'd appreciate it. I think it's going to be something that, given my background, especially during this time with regard to need for scrutinizing and working and stretching, making a budget work to fulfill everybody's needs, it's something that I do every day. I think that that's going to go a long way. I've also had a few different people here in town, younger voters, reach out to me that were moved and supportive of my push here for the Select Board, and want to know how they can get involved. I think a lot of younger voters here in town just aren't sure how to get involved and where. And that's going to be an initiative that I want to take into account. And if elected or not, bring them to the forefront and make sure that more people's voices are heard. And that's going to build some bridges and partner with everybody else to collaborate. And that's what's going to make us as a community a lot stronger in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clay.
Thanks to the organizers. Thanks to the other candidates. It's great for democracy to have more candidates. So it's a great year for Westford in that way. And I'm always just dazzled by the amazing group of people that work together in this town in so many ways, so many volunteer ways. It's really a model, I think, for a way that people can care about each other and work together. I look forward to serving Westford, serving you, to promote safety and wellness, excellent schools, and a welcoming community. I will listen, I will seek community input, and I'll work to find a balance between our needs and our fiscal resources. As a Select Board member and candidate, I've been fortunate to meet with many members of our community, seniors, students, members of our communities of color, town staff, police, and our excellent educators. I've heard from you how important the special community that we have here is, how important the schools are, and how important it is that we work to become more welcoming and more diverse as a community. We have important areas that need our focus, in particular emotional wellness support to address the chronic problems of self-harm, suicide, addiction, and domestic abuse. And I'll continue to work hard on those issues to find a broad coalition that can find the right balance and the right set of resources for the town that we want to be, the town that reflects the values that we hold together. We're facing a lot of fiscal challenges at this point, and And I've worked through those both in the business world and in the municipal volunteer world. I know how to work together. I know how to bring in voices. I know how to make the decisions you need to make when you need to make them, and not wait too long and not cut too early. And so I really believe in the end, I'm an optimist. I believe that in the end, we're going to see a recovery in future budget cycles. We'll be able to stabilize. We'll be able to come back. We'll be able to continue to build on this great town and community that we've built together. And again, reach the town that really reflects our values. I look forward to listening, working, and serving. And Westford, please stay safe and stay well.
Thank you very much. Thank you to these candidates running for the Select Board, and thank you to all of the candidates running to represent the interests of the citizens of Westford. And I will now turn the meeting back over to Laura Dickey.
I'd just like to wrap up. I would like to thank Heather McNeil for moderating this evening. She's been very flexible in our new format here, and I think it's worked out well. And I'm glad we were able to provide this to the town. Thank you to Joanna Myers for being our timer virtually. I'd also like to thank the candidates for participating, WestfordCAT for recording and streaming, and they'll be streaming the event shortly. And to the many league members who worked on questions and worked overall to make this evening possible. Remember that you can request a mail-in ballot from the town clerk's office or vote in person on Tuesday, June 30th. Thank you and good night.